Hey guys, welcome to Pocket Saga. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Ash went to Crown Tundra with Chloe and Go? Part 3, Final. This story is the return of the Regi Master by author Pika Blue 182. Before starting, if you are interested in Pokemon fanfictions, you can consider subscribing this channel and like this video, that will help a lot. Now let's dive in. Finally, we've made it! Go exclaimed in awe, as the group finally made their long-awaited arrival at the ruins. The group of travelers took in the sight, all equally in amazement. The sunset still present in the background only added to the beauty of the location, with the last few remaining lights of the sun allowing the travelers to admire the exterior of the seemingly ancient temple. The ruins definitely looked rusted up and old, clearly having not seen much attention in the past decades, but the structure as a whole still looked decently intact. There were a good amount of stairs leading to the temple's entrance, stuck in between two walls, and a couple stone pillars held the foundation and the roof together, the roof having strange patterns on the front that nobody really paid attention to for the time being. Overall, a truly wonderful locale, although there was one thing that didn't sit well with a certain blonde-haired girl. It's a great site and all, but the builders of this place could have at least chosen some better color palettes. I'm not really feeling this weird, yellow and burgundy mix, she confessed with an unpleasant look on her face. Says the person with the mix of light blonde, bright pink and blue on her head, Chloe muttered, noting the irony in the girl's statement. Peonia heard her comment from afar and obviously wasn't going to let her get away with it. Well, at least I'm somewhat creative. Being a single bland color isn't much better, the Galar native replied sassily, not so subtly referring to Chloe's hair. It's better than your attempt at becoming a rainbow with all those colors, Chloe defended back, practically growling at Peonia's comment. The boys of the group looked at each other awkwardly, not really knowing what to say at the sight of the two girls bickering. Judging by Chloe's reply, Peonia knew she had hit a nerve and decided to tease her even more. She smirked before suddenly shifting towards Ash and laying her head on his shoulder, the action surprising just about everyone, and saying, "Oh please, besides, we've already established thanks to Team Rocket that Ash over here prefers blonde hair, and that's what matters, right Chloe?" "Huh," was all what Ash could utter, as he was too stunned and confused to say anything else. He tried to look to Go and Brandon for help as to what was happening, but the pair shrugged, equally baffled. Even Pikachu, who had to move to the top of Ash's head since Peonia took his spot, seemed lost in the situation. Only Chloe had a visible reaction, the girl practically having steam come out of ears in anger. "I have no idea what you're talking about, and that's just what Team Rocket said," Chloe shouted back flusteredly. At this point, she had already started regretting telling Peonia anything. "Well, why don't we make sure?" Peonia backed away from Ash and looked at him with a wide grin, before asking, "So Ash, which do you like more? Blonde or whatever color Chloe's hair is?" What? You He looked between Peonia and Chloe, blinking, not really knowing what to say. The Alolan champion then looked back at Brandon and Go again, and was originally met with the same confusion as earlier. That is until the Pyramid King and his research partner looked at each other and, after a moment, turned back towards the Pallet Town trainer, with a smirk on their faces. As Ash visibly shifted to a questioning expression, Go laughed and said, "Go on then, which one do you prefer, Ash?" "Go, Brandon, come on, help me out here. It's a simple question, Ketchum, shouldn't be too hard to answer for a champion like you," the Frontier Brain mentioned, cutting him off in the process. That doesn't even make any sense. What does that have to do with any of this?" Ash tried to reason. Why did everybody all of a sudden put him on the spot? He looked around and noticed everybody was awaiting his answer and sighed. They clearly weren't going to let him go until he said something, so he decided he might as well be honest. Although, he wasn't expecting it to be something so difficult to say out loud, and he didn't know if it was because he felt peer pressured into answering or if it was the answer itself. He took one final breath, and finally said, "Well, if I have to answer." Ash looked at Peonia, who still had a wide grin on her face, then to Chloe, who seemed to still have a slightly triggered expression from earlier, but with a slight hint of eagerness. Then finally, Ash looked straight down at the ground. "No offense, Peonia, but I actually think I prefer Chloe's hair." "Huh?" was all Chloe said after a quite long silence, as she went wide-eyed at Ash's answer, with everybody else in the group seemingly equally surprised. They clearly weren't expecting Ash to give such a straightforward answer. The Alolan champion, not liking the lack of reactions from his companions, quickly added to his answer in an attempt to recover from the awkward situation. It's not that big of a deal. It's just like Team Rocket and Peonia said. I've seen and been around a lot of, well, blonde-haired people and... Ash seemed to get flustered, his voice becoming almost a whisper, as he clearly was embarrassed. I guess I like Chloe's hair more because it's, well, different. Go and Brandon took in what their friend said, and the Vermilion City researcher broke the silence between everybody with his comment. I guess that makes sense. Peonia, whose grin turned into more of a smug look, conceded. That's fair enough. The blonde-haired girl then quickly made her way back to Chloe and whispered in her ear. Looks like your competition got a lot smaller, Chloe. The Vermilion City girl went beet red and immediately changed the subject. See, can we just go in the temple already? We've wasted enough time here, she shouted to everyone, as she began marching robotically towards the entrance of the Split Decision ruins. Peonia chuckled to herself before quickly following suit, and Brandon and Go gave each other one last grin before doing the same. Ash, meanwhile, sighed to himself, glad to know the attention was away from him, and took his time before joining his friends. Pikachu looked at him worriedly as he started walking, wondering why his friend seemed so flustered as he answered, but his trainer simply patted him on the head and reassured him that it was nothing. Chloe arrived first at the entrance of the old temple, and her embarrassment from earlier was quickly washed away as she let out a quiet, whoa, at the interesting drawings all over the dual-colored door. The rest of the group arrived soon after and they all had a similar reaction to the young girl. Ash then asked an important question that he hoped someone had the answer to. Okay, so, does anybody know how exactly we get in? He asked generally. There's something written here next to the door, Go noted, before getting closer and reading the message out loud. When gather the three giants, the door of destiny shall be opened. Well, that's awfully vague, the three giants? That could mean just about anything, Peonia complained. The three giants, the Pyramid King muttered quietly. What Peonia said was definitely true, it could realistically mean a plethora of things, but if they took into consideration the information they already knew, and some of his own suspicions, then maybe. Got anything, Brandon? Ash asked, noticing the Battle Frontier's thinking expression. I'm not 100% certain, but remember when I told you three about the reported readings from here being similar to some of the wild Regi Pokemon? He asked specifically to Ash, Go and Chloe. The three confirmed with nods and Brandon continued. Well, whilst they are four confirmed known Regis, only three of them people consider to be part of what is often called the Titan Trio, since Regigigas is technically their creator, and considering the possibility I mentioned yesterday that maybe these ruins are connected to an old myth of Galar detailing the possibility that Regigigas created two more Regis, then maybe the three giants mentioned in the message is a reference to the Titan Trio, or in other words, Regirock, Registeel and Regice. That definitely does seem possible, although I'm not too sure what when gather could mean, Go added. Well, let's find out. Brandon swiftly pulled out a trio of Pokeballs and threw them to the sky. All right, Regirock, Registeel, Regice, I require your assistance. As the three Titan Pokemon appeared, Chloe, even though she knew Brandon owned Regirock and Regice and suspected he owned the whole trio, was still surprised to see he also owned a Registeel. Meanwhile, Peonia, having only met Regirock, was fully stunned. Why, you have all three of them? Peonia asked with a shaky voice. The Pyramid King nodded and the blonde-haired girl questioned herself just who she was traveling with. So, what now? We gathered them, but the door is still closed, Ash said, mentioning the fact the door didn't budge. Maybe we have to say something for the door to open, Chloe suggested randomly. Go was the first one to shoot down the idea. Come on, Chloe, there's no way that's how it would work. The Vermilion City researcher laughed before mocking his companion. Do you really think saying something like, "Oh secret door, we've gathered all three giants, please let us enter your domain, will do something?" Go was cut off by Brandon's three Pokemon, who started making incomprehensible noises and their braille patterns started reacting to something. After a good 10 seconds of strange noises from the Regis, the ground started shaking and the door suddenly opened. Chloe looked smugly at Go and said, "You were saying?" The Project Mew participant was left-mouth agape. "I'm just going to pretend that was one heck of a coincidence," he muttered, before Ash took the lead. "Well, no matter how the door opens, At least we can get in now. Let's go, everyone, Ash shouted as he entered the ruins. Peonia, Go and Chloe quickly followed their good friend. Brandon, who was left behind, was just about to join them, when suddenly, he spotted strange patterns just above the door that he didn't recognize. He narrowed his eyes and saw two different combinations of circles and wondered if they had anything to do with something. The Pyramid King mentally took a note of them, before recalling his 3 Pokémon and entering the mysterious temple. After entering the ruins, the group were faced with a pretty long set of stairs. It was a pretty narrow path and looked quite ominous, but the group were far too excited to finally see what the mysterious temple had within to care. The young teens were practically racing up the stairs, grins on their faces, to the point where even Brandon following right behind them was surprised by their enthusiasm. The Pyramid King smiled to himself as he tried to catch up with his younger companions. Despite not being much of an emotional guy, he was truly enjoying this little adventure. It was definitely more enjoyable than just traveling alone, and he got to befriend people such as Go, Peonia and Chloe. Even though they were noticeably not used to traveling like this, it surprisingly didn't really bother him, since it definitely made his adventure more exciting. And on top of that, there was one more thing, or rather person, that he started seeing differently. Brandon started seeing a certain raven-haired trainer in a new light. Indeed, Ash had taken him by surprise quite a bit. The Pyramid King had been following Ash's journey throughout the multiple leagues and competitions he had participated in from time to time, and whilst his results alone told you enough about his fantastic progress as a trainer, this trip allowed Brandon to appreciate his growth as a person as well. Whilst the Alolan champion might not have noticed it himself, he had changed quite a lot since originally defeating him in the Kanto Battle Frontier. Yeah, he still had the same goofy and childish attitude as before, but his mentality towards life had changed drastically. He was no longer obsessed with just winning. He had learned to not let his ego take over and truly appreciate the small moments in traveling and the people and Pokémon around him instead. It's the little things like seeing how him and Go joke around as the best of friends. How he reacted so innocently to Peonia basically fanboying him on the first day. How he managed to get a bunch of random trainers to start a snowball fight. How he managed to earn Chloe's trust in just under 2 days after the girls seemingly hated him, or even as simple as how he always seemed to have a smile on his face no matter what happened. Those were some traits you'd only see influential people like champions have, and it made Brandon wonder just how far the kid could go in life, and as a trainer, it made the Pyramid King want to see him battle more often just to see how good he could get. He was even starting to consider joining the Pokémon World Coronation Series just so he could face Ash head-on again. Woo, whoever made this place sure must have liked stairs, Ash commented, as he finally arrived at the top of the giant staircase, and put his hands on his knees, exhausted. The trainer only looked up when his starter Pokémon poked him from his shoulder and pointed ahead. "What's up, Pikachu?" He turned and looked to where his Pokémon was pointing and let out. "Whoa, what is this place?" "These stairs are gonna kill me," Chloe said, as she was the next one to arrive, and upon seeing Ash dazed, she worriedly asked, "Ash, what's up? See anything?" "Take a look for yourself." The Vermilion City girl walked up just next to Ash and looked ahead, and she went mouth agape at what she saw. The two humans had reached a giant and vast open room. The split color palettes from earlier were more present than ever, with half of the room having its walls completely colored in yellow, and the other half in burgundy. It was a pretty empty space in general, with the only noticeable things being some strange dots scattered on the ground and a giant statue at the back of the room. But the emptiness mixed in with the simplicity of the temple's interior design made the space feel a lot more mysterious and ominous. Due to their temporarily dazed state, Chloe and Ash failed to notice the rest of the group had caught up to them and had similar reactions to them, with Peonia commenting, "Geez, this place is basically empty, yet it somehow gives me the creeps." Brandon, also noting the deserted nature of the place, said, "Let's look around, see if we can find anything." The group nodded and spread it out all across the room, analyzing anything that could be of use to them. Go and Chloe started doing laps around the room, mainly looking to see if anything was written on the walls, but to no avail. Peonia and Brandon decided to take a look at the statue in the far room, and Brandon noted there were braille patterns engraved on the statue, indicating they were probably right about the place having something to do with the Regis. Ash took an interest towards the dots on the ground, which he found out could be lit up, and proceeded to have way too much fun with Pikachu jumping on them in a weird attempt at creating a light show. A couple minutes went by and the majority of the group reunited. "Find anything, guys?" Peonia first asked. "Sadly, no. The room really is just empty apart from the statue and the dots on the ground," Go responded. How about we try turning the dots on in a certain way? Surely those have some kind of purpose," Ash suggested. "Well, since we don't have any other ideas, it's worth a shot," Brandon approved, as he and the rest of the gang started approaching the formation of dots in the center of the room. As they were walking, Ash noticed Chloe seemed hesitant, so he told Pikachu on his shoulder to go on ahead so he could ask her about it privately. "You okay, Chloe?" "Oh, why yeah, just starting to feel a little nervous I guess," she replied, twiddling her thumbs. Despite originally being excited to finally be able to explore the ruins, after all they went through in the past 2 days just to get here, she was starting to feel a little worried about what could happen now that they are here, considering all the danger they've faced already. Ash smiled softly at her response. He couldn't really blame her for how she was feeling right now, but the girl clearly seemed excited when they entered the temple, so he wanted to raise her morale back up. The hyperclass trainer took Chloe's hand reassuringly, earning a shocked look from the girl as she flinched in surprise, and said, "There's nothing to worry about. After all we've been through to get here, we're ready for just about anything." Noticing the girl's startled reaction, Ash turned sheepish and added jokingly, "Well, I think so anyways." Chloe, blushing slightly, chuckled at Ash's attempt to make her feel better. Whilst she definitely wouldn't admit it out loud, just him taking her hand was already enough to reassure her. "You're right, thanks Ash." He gave her his signature toothy grin and the girl laughed again, and Ash retracted his hand, to the girl's slight dismay. Though, this made Chloe start to wonder since when Ash got so comfortable with her to the point where he could just take her hand abruptly. Not that she complained or anything, it was just amusing to her to see how differently they interact now compared to 2 days ago. The girl mentally cursed herself at her train of thought. Whilst Peonia might have made Chloe realize she had fallen for the boy, which was definitely a good thing since she finally figured out why she felt so weird around him recently, it also made her realize just how much of an effect he had on her. All Ash did was take her hand, and all of a sudden Chloe felt her stress wash away. She was surprised she's never noticed just how easily Ash made her feel more comfortable. Pikachu. The electric mouse suddenly exclaimed from just ahead of the group, indicating he was getting impatient and wanted to get a move on. Brandon smirked at the electric type's enthusiasm and gave his orders as they reached the dots. "All right, if we look at the pattern here," Brandon first said, as he examined how exactly the dots were aligned. There was a vertical line of 4 dots in the middle and 3 dots lined up in some sort of triangles on either side. We can try turning on only the ones on the side." "Worth a shot," Go said simply, as the group went and stood on the 6 dots on either side of the middle line, with Ash, Brandon and Pikachu lighting up the ones on the left, and Go, Chloe and Peonia lighting up the ones on the right. Nothing happened, and the group of travelers proceeded to try for the next several minutes multiple different combinations, only to get the same result every time, eventually causing slight frustration to some of the humans. "Arg, nothing's working," Go commented, mentioning the obvious. "Maybe there's something around here that has a clue as to how we should light them up." As everybody started thinking of any clues to help them solve the puzzle, Brandon had a thought that maybe the hint wasn't actually in the room they were in, and was in some place prior instead. The Pyramid King tried to think back to something he might have seen earlier, and unconsciously drifted his eyes towards the statue at the back of the room. All of a sudden, some of the lights of the braille patterns of the rock sculpture abruptly flickered on, so fast that Brandon probably would have missed it if he had blinked. The Pyramid King didn't get a good look at the pattern to remember it, but it looked familiar to something he saw outside. The man went wide-eyed, as he finally remembered the strange patterns he saw on top of the door of the temple earlier, and thought that maybe those were the clues all along. He was about to share his discovery with the rest of the group, when all of a sudden Ash spoke up. "I just realized, we haven't tried just turning on all of the dots at the same time. Maybe that does something," he suggested. You're right Ash. "Well, we can try I guess. How about it guys?" Go questioned the rest of his companions. "Sure, I don't see why not," replied Chloe and Peonia accordingly. The young trainers then looked at Brandon awaiting his response. The man in question frowned. He really wanted to try his own theory of the patterns he saw from earlier, but what Ash suggested wasn't completely illogical either. The Pallet Town trainer's idea was worth trying, and if he didn't work, they could always just try his own idea right after. On top of that, he didn't quite remember the patterns from outside anyways, so they would have to go back just to see them again, and maybe the flickering dots on the statues was just his old eyes messing with him. He was getting on with age after all. Yeah, let's try that, Brandon ended up saying with nod, temporarily pushing aside his theory. They could try it if Ash's idea didn't work, and besides, why would there be two different patterns of dots in the first place anyways? Okay, well, since there are 10 dots and only 6 of us including Pikachu, how about you guys send out a Pokemon each to fill out the rest of the dots? Ash asked to the unanimous approval of everybody. Chloe released her only Pokemon, Eevee, who hadn't been out of its Pokeball for a while because Chloe thought she deserved a break after all the battling she had done recently, which made the normal type visibly ecstatic, as it was practically dying to do something, proven by the fact Eevee immediately started running all excitedly once it was released from its contraption, forcing its trainer to have to calm it down. Go released his starter, Pokemon Cinderace, who was also equally keen on being able to do something. Peonia released her trusty Tyrantrum, and finally, Brandon released his Steel-type Pokemon Registeel. After the trainers explained to their Pokemon what they had to do, they lined themselves up as follows. In order, on the middle line of dots, Ash, Pikachu, Brandon and Registeel were to stand, Chloe, Eevee and Go were to stand on the triangle of dots on the left, and Peonia, Tyrantrum and Cinderace on the triangle of dots on the right. They had decided that Ash should give a countdown to 3, and at the end, everybody would jump on their designated dot, turning them on at the same time. The group were mentally preparing themselves when Ash asked, "All right everyone, ready?" he asked with a hint of excitement and eagerness. Nods from the humans and Pokemon were all Ash needed as confirmation. The hyperclass trainer took one last big breath and started. Okay. 3, Go felt a lump in his throat as Ash started the countdown. This could actually be it. Everything they went through just to get here all led up to this moment, where hopefully, they would finally resolve the mystery of the split decision ruins. He looked across to Brandon and his own partner Cinderace, both of which gave the young researcher a smirk, causing the trainer to form a smirk of his own. 2. Peonia felt her heartbeat speed up, as the thrill and excitement of the mystery of the temple was starting to catch up to her. She had had so much fun so far on this trip with everyone despite all their issues, and in all honesty didn't want it to end, though she knew that whatever was hiding in this temple was definitely worthy of being the grand finale to this awesome adventure. She looked at her Tyrantrum and smiled, with the Pokemon smiling back, as they waited patiently. 1. Chloe felt a rush of adrenaline as Ash reached the final number. A bunch of images from multiple different events from the past 2 days suddenly flashed in her mind, reminding her of how far the group had come in such a short period of time. The girl glanced at her starter, who showed no sign of fear or stress, before glancing at her newfound crush. Ash quickly caught Chloe's glance on him, and grinned, making the Vermilion City girl grin back, before finally saying, "Now!" Ash shouted, causing the entire group to jump on their dots, lighting them all up instantly. Well, that was anticlimactic, Peonia expressed, as after the overdramatic build-up, nothing really happened. The rest of the group lowered their heads, disappointed. Dang, I really thought that was going to work. Before Ash could finish his sentence, the ground suddenly started shaking violently, making the group struggle to stay on their feet. The mini earthquake was accompanied by a loud crackling sound coming from the statue at the back of the room, its lights flickering on and off at an alarming rate. What's happening? Chloe shouted in a slight panic, as whatever was going on didn't seem at all normal. Whatever it is, this doesn't seem good, Go shouted back similarly, starting to think jumping on the dots all at the same time wasn't what they were supposed to do. Their panic was interrupted once again by the marbled statue, this time letting out one last crackling sound before completely collapsing. The group looked at the hole in the wall revealed by the statue and 2 unknown figures appeared. A red-looking floating orb and a yellow-looking floating orb, appearing not at all pleased with the human's presence. The 2 figures seemed to resemble some type of Pokemon, but it was clear by the travelers' expressions that none of them had ever seen anything like them before. The yellow-looking orb resembled a golem-like Pokemon and had a round yellow body with 3 spikes on top of its head. It had a pink pattern on its face that resembled the letter X, and seemingly had 5 blue, metal-like insulated rings with 2 serving as shoulders connected to electric-like arms, while the other 3 served as a combined bottom for the triangle body shape with lightning-shaped legs. The Pokémon was seemingly made out of pure electricity and let out an eerie cry upon arrival, making its body glow an almost blinding shade of yellow. The red-looking orb had a dark red body with a blue dot pattern on its face that resembles the capital letter Y, and also looked like some sort of golem-like Pokémon, except with parts of a dragon's mouth as arms. It had 2 red legs with black feet that were shaped like teeth. The right arm resembled a dragon's upper jaw, while the left arm was shaped like a bottom jaw with dark red coloration underneath both arms. 2 red spikes shaped like wings were located behind its back. Similarly to its electric friend, its body glowed after letting out a cry, this time, a blinding burgundy color. At this point the ground had stopped shaking, but the 2 Pokémon now standing in front of the group did little to lower the nerves of the travelers. "Are those Pokémon?" Peonia asked generally, not really knowing the nature of the figures that abruptly entered the room. "And why are they looking at us with deadly glares?" she added as well, in slight worry. "I knew it," Brandon muttered, earning the attention of the other trainers. "Those are the last 2 creations of Regigigas that haven't been seen since ancient times. The electric-type Regieleki, said to be powerful enough to generate Galar's entire energy, and the dragon-type Regidrago, said to be sealed away long ago because the people of Galar feared the destruction it was capable of if it was ever fully complete by Regigigas." Go, in absolute disbelief, turned to the Pyramid King very slowly and blinked. "Brandon, so you're saying one is capable of generating an entire region's energy, and the other one is so powerful it had to be locked away?" "Yes, old myths from Galar say so," the Regi master replied indifferently. Go looked at the rest companions, then back to Brandon, took a huge breath and shouted, "You decide to tell us about that now?" The Pyramid King frowned and argued, "I wasn't sure until now, and I didn't want to worry you all with things that might not even have been true. And remember, those myths are thousands of years old, who knows how much of those stories have aged poorly. You and Ash specifically should know that not everything old legends say is true. The Darkest Day legend of the 2 heroes in Eternatus turned out to be something completely different after all, didn't it?" Go frowned at his response, but Brandon did have a point. Galar had a strange reputation of badly retelling their old myths, although that still didn't make the Vermilion City researcher more reassured about the whole situation they now found themselves in. "Whatever those myths say, it's not like we have a woe." Ash, once again not being able to finish his sentence, was immediately cut off by Regidrago, who suddenly used Hammer Arm on the ground, causing an opening in the floor in the middle of the room, which unfortunately for Ash, Brandon, Pikachu and Registeel, forced them to fall into a black abyss. Brandon and Registeel were the first to fall, but Ash managed to quickly grab hold of the edge to the opening and clinged on desperately with one hand on the edge, and, acting instinctively, barely managed to catch Pikachu by his paw with his other hand, the Pokémon dangling in the abyss. "Pikapi!" screamed the electric mouse in horror, as the only thing separating him and unknown fate was his trainer's loose hand barely holding on to his paw. "Ash! Brandon!" exclaimed worriedly simultaneously Go, Peonia, Chloe and their Pokémon. They started running to the hole in the ground in an attempt to salvage their companion on the verge of joining the Pyramid King in the abyss, but were swiftly interrupted by the same burgundy figure, who shot an unrecognizable purple beam just in front of them, stopping them right in their tracks, before it quickly dashed towards the opening in the ground. The Regi Pokémon barely acknowledged the fact Ash was still hanging on the edge of the abyss and shoved him whilst racing down towards where Brandon had fallen, causing Ash's grip to slip even more. "Whoa!" the Alolan champion screamed as he barely saw the burgundy figure float past him down into the abyss, and struggled even more to hang on. Chloe was the next one to act as she immediately started sprinting in an attempt to save Ash from falling. "Ash!" she screamed once more, as Ash's grip started to loosen even more. Go and Peonia and their Pokémon were about to join Chloe in helping their good friend, but were once again stopped, this time by an unfamiliar thunderbolt from the Regieleki, causing them to fall on the ground, narrowly avoiding the lightning bolt. Chloe, ignoring the commands of Pokémon behind her, had finally reached the opening, and managed to grab Ash's arm right just as the Pallet Town native lost his grip. Unfortunately for them, Chloe, obviously not being quite as strong as her companion, struggled keeping Ash from falling, as she now lied down on the floor and desperately tried to use anything to stabilize herself, but the weight of her companion was just too much for her to handle. "Eevee!" screeched out Chloe's only Pokemon, as it expressed its panic. It desperately wanted to help out its trainer, but the Regieleki was having none of it and decided to relentlessly shoot out thunderbolts at the group, forcing the group and their Pokemon to fight back with their own moves as Chloe was left alone in trying to save Ash. "Chloe, don't," Ash practically pleaded, as it was clear the girl wasn't strong enough to hold him up, and the Alolan champion didn't want her to join him into a fall of uncertainty just for his sake. No, I have got to. I'm not letting you down again, ah." Chloe tried to argue, but was caught in her words and let out a scream as she started losing Ash's grip, and she was getting dangerously close to falling herself. But she couldn't let go. Ash had saved her so many times already because he didn't give up on her, so she had to return the favor, and not give up on him. Ash, also feeling his grip on Chloe loosened, knew the girl was too focused on saving him that she didn't realize the danger she was putting herself in as well. The trainer looked at his Pokemon and gave him a nod. The electric mouse hanging on to his trainer seemed to understand the message his trainer was trying to relay and nodded back. Ash took one last look at Chloe and mouthed a silent, "Sorry." The girl in question frowned in confusion, but before she could try to understand what he was trying to say, the hyperclass trainer shouted, "Pikachu Electro Web." "What?" Pikachu, with absolutely no hesitation, shot an Electro Web straight upwards. Chloe, obviously not expecting the sudden attack, flinched backwards, causing her to finally lose her grip on Ash. She screamed out his name once more, but it was futile, as the trainer was long gone into the abyss. "Ash, why?" the Vermilion City girl said more softly this time. She stared at the opening in which her companion had fallen for a while in silence. Why was he so dang selfish?" she repeated in her head a couple times. She didn't get it. Why was Ash always like this? First the Galarian Articuno incident, now this. Both times, Ash made the conscious decision to sacrifice himself for her, and if she was completely frank, she hated it. This time, Chloe tried to save him, to repay him for all the times he put his friends before himself, but once again, he chose to let himself be the one to deal with all the consequences. "For Arceus' sake, Ash, just let me save you. Let me be able to repay you for all the times you saved me," she screamed in her mind once again. "Chloe, watch out!" Go warned as he brought Chloe back to reality. Chloe turned her head only to find Regieleki staring her down, before letting out another thunderbolt. Chloe was left paralyzed as the bolt of electric approached, but fortunately, Peonia noticed her immobilized state and said, "Tyrantrum, block it with ancient power," the blonde-haired girl ordered. Her loyal Pokemon immediately formed a silver ball with a green core, before hurling it between Regielecki's thunderbolt and Chloe, intercepting it, and causing a mini smokescreen. Peonia then looked at Chloe and said, "It's Ash, he'll be fine, now help us out, this thing's kinda strong." "All right," she replied, pushing her thoughts of Ash aside temporarily, and regrouping with Go, Peonia, Eevee, Cinderace and Tyrantrum. The trio of humans and Pokemon stood as bravely as they could in front of the mysterious threat. The Pokemon suddenly glowed a blinding yellow, causing the group to temporarily cover their eyes, bolts of electricity seemingly bursting out of the Electron Pokemon. Once they had reopened their eyes, the group were shocked to find the opening Ash and Brandon had fallen through was now completely covered up, like nothing had happened. Did Regieleki just do that?" Peonia asked in confusion. "I don't know, but it seems like we have bigger issues right now," Go responded, as the Regieleki once again glowed yellow and let out a dome of electricity covering the entire room, signifying electric terrain. "Come on, I've done enough battling today already," the blonde-haired complained, before reluctantly ordering her Tyrantrum to get ready. "Let's do this, Tyrantrum." "Time to shine, Cinderace," Go added, as his starter cried back in affirmation. The young researcher had trained a lot with Brandon recently, and it was time to put his ace Pokemon to the test. "You're up, Eevee," Chloe also added, her only Pokemon jumping in front of her. She might not have been able to save Ash, but she decided to use her frustration from that as a weapon against Regieleki. As the group got in a battle stance, Regieleki seemed to do some sort of laugh, before using extreme speed to run around the group at blistering speeds, warning them about what's to come. "This is gonna be annoying," unconsciously thought the three humans at the same time. "Can this thing just sit still and stop moving for a second?" Peonia shouted, stating the obvious. It had been approximately 5 minutes since Ash and Brandon had fallen into a realm of unknown, and Go, Peonia and Chloe were left to deal with the Regieleki. For the past while, the only thing the Electron Pokémon did was dash around the room at speeds the group of travelers didn't even know were possible, fueling their frustration. Arg! More Pyro Balls, Cinderace! Help me out, guys, Go exclaimed, getting tired of trying to hit a target they could barely see, it was moving so fast. Peonia and Chloe complied by ordering their Pokémon to use Rock Slide and Copycat on the Pyro Balls, but to no avail, as the Regieleki simply kept on dashing around the room in a flash. This isn't working, we need to figure out a way to keep it still. We're not getting anywhere by just attacking aimlessly, the Vermilion City girl argued, equally frustrated by the Regi Pokémon. I mean, at least it isn't attacking us, the young researcher exhaled, trying to look at the plus side. As if perfectly on cue, Regieleki stopped for a brief moment, giving the humans temporary hope that it had finally got tired. Unfortunately, Regieleki only halted so it could switch directions and use extreme speed on Cinderace, Tyrantrum and Eevee, going even faster whilst also dealing damage. You just had to say something, Go, Peonia commented whilst giving her companion a glare. Actually, this might be our chance, Chloe suddenly said out of nowhere, causing her two friends to look at her questioningly. If it's going to start attacking us, then we at least know it's gonna have to eventually come close to one of our Pokémon. We just have to predict who's it gonna go for next and stop it in its tracks. And how exactly are we going to do that? Chloe's childhood friend questioned further. Study its pattern, and hope for the best, she declared with a similar amount of confidence a person Go and Peonia knew all too well would. Wow, Ash's attitude really is rubbing off on you, Peonia noted. Go simply nodded approvingly. Just focus on the battle, Chloe retorted embarrassingly. Despite their Pokémon being relentlessly attacked, the three humans took time to try and figure out Regielecky's pattern of movement. They quickly figured out the Pokémon was dashing towards Eevee first, then Cinderace, then Tyrantrum, always in that order. The trainers told their Pokémon to pay attention to how much time was in between hits and judge the time they should use their attacks on that, since it was way too fast using extreme speed to see exactly when to strike. Even with the constant damage they were taking, the three loyal Pokémon complied. It took a little while, but the Pokémon had roughly figured out how much time it took Regieleki to complete a full lap of attacks, and soon enough they got themselves prepared. Alright everyone, Go said, deciding to take the lead in commanding the plan. Cinderace, when you're ready you do the first move, then while it's stunned, Eevee and Tyrantrum, you hit it with your own moves, got it? Cries of affirmation from Cinderace, Eevee and Tyrantrum gave Go some hope this could actually work. Cinderace closed its eyes, and waited one more lap before making its move. The fire type flinched initially at being hit by another extreme speed, but quickly recomposed itself. After a very short time frame, it heard Tyrantrum get hit, then in the same time frame, Eevee, and finally Sin. The bunny sensed the Electron Pokémon approaching and prepared a blaze kick. Deerace! It exclaimed as it perfectly calculated Regielecky's path and landed a power kick to the Pokémon's chest, sending it flying in an unexpected direction to the shock of the opposing Pokémon. Unfortunately for the group, they hadn't expected Regielecky to be sent so far. It had eventually reached Tyrantrum and was about to collide with it. Luckily, Peonia was quick on her feet, and came up with a solution. Dragon Claw. Send it to Eevee, the blonde-haired girl ordered, her companions looking surprised by her command. Tyrantrum didn't hesitate though, and its right claw was quickly enveloped in a green aura, the despot Pokémon slashing the Regielecky with its claw towards the direction of Chloe's Eevee. It took a second, but Chloe thankfully realized Peonia's plan and continued the chain. Do the same and send it to Cinderace again. Eevee Vui! Exclaimed the normal type. Similarly to Tyrantrum, its right paw glowed green before Eevee slashed Regielecky straight back to Cinderace, creating some sort of pinball scenario, with Regielecky acting as the ball. Double kick Cinderace. Cinderace smirked at Go's command, and once the opposing Regi Pokémon got close enough, the striker Pokémon kicked Regielecky with its right leg to stun the Pokémon, then swiftly kicked it again with its left leg to send it to the wall, a huge booming sound occurring as the electric-type Regi Pokémon collided with the concrete before dropping to the ground. Alright. That was awesome, Peonia celebrated, gladly enjoying the fact they had temporarily bested the Regieleki. The friendly Pokémon celebrated as well, before Go quickly pointed out they still had work to do. It's not over yet, it looks like it still has some fight in it. Indeed, the Electron Pokémon rapidly picked itself up from the ground, looking not at all happy by the little game of pinball they had played, and let out a loud cry, lightning bursting once more from its body as it created a dome of electricity surrounding the entire room. Looks like it stopped playing around, Chloe noted, seeing Regieleki set up an electric terrain. What came next was a series of thunderbolts, forcing the group of travelers' Pokémons to move. "Dodge it!" shouted the three trainers. The Pokémon successfully managed to dodge all the bolts of lightning, though the noticeable power behind the Regielecky's move was worrisome. "Get in there with quick attack Cinderace, you two Tyrantrum, Dragon Claw. Copycat it's Thunderbolt Eevee," ordered Go, Peonia and Chloe accordingly. Go's fire type quickly charged in first, but the Regieleki easily evaded it with the faster move Extreme Speed. Then the Electron Pokémon charged towards Tyrantrum to match it. Peonia's Pokémon tried to predict its movement and used Dragon Claw a little early, but unfortunately for it, Regieleki managed to duck under the move and strike Tyrantrum from behind, causing the Rock type to skid forward. The Regi Pokémon then took one look at Eevee's Thunderbolt and decided to best it, shooting out another Thunderbolt of its own, its body glowing a weird yellow as it launched the move, something not going unnoticed by the humans. Chloe knew that Eevee was probably outpowered here, but what she wasn't expecting was for it not even to be a contest, as Regielecky's Thunderbolt easily outpowered Chloe's Pokémon in another surprising display of power. The bolt made contact with the normal type, dealing a great deal of damage and causing an explosion. "Eevee!" worriedly screamed out the maroon-haired girl, surprised at just how easily Regieleki dealt with her partner. Eevee was seen flying from out of the smoke and SWIFLTY landed hard on the ground, badly hurt. The Electron Pokémon wasn't done just yet though, as it soon set its sight on a familiar dinosaur and bunny, but instead of rushing straight for them, it flew above them and energy started crackling from its body. Peonia, not knowing what move the opposing Pokémon was using, decided to play it safe. Quick, protect. Tyrantrum quickly formed a turquoise shield surrounding it and Cinderace in hopes of avoiding whatever move Regieleki was using. The Electron Pokémon glowed yellow once more and started pouring down bolts of lightning from its body onto the two Pokémon, the move colliding with the shield formed by Tyrantrum, and to the humans' surprise, the shield started breaking. "What on Arceus is that move?" Peonia shouted, not at all familiar with the electric-type move. "I don't know, but somehow it's powerful enough to break through Protect," Go replied, noting the fact Protect should have fully, protected them. "Look, its body it's glowing like when it used Thunderbolt earlier," Chloe mentioned. The group of humans looked up to find that it was indeed the case, seemingly giving Regieleki more power. It didn't take long before the bombardment of lightning bolts from the Electron Pokémon completely shattered Tyrantrum's shield, and hit it and Cinderace straight on, dealing massive damage and sending the two Pokémon crashing into the opposite wall. Go and Peonia simultaneously shouted out their Pokémon's name in worry. "Whatever that glow is, it's giving that Regieleki some serious power," Peonia said, noting how both Eevee's Thunderbolt and Tyrantrum's Protect didn't even stand a chance against its moves. Even with electric terrain, there's no way whatever move it just used should have been that powerful. "Weird, its body didn't glow like that earlier when it was using Extreme Speed," remarked Chloe. "Let's just keep our distance while we see that glow, our regular moves don't stand a chance against that power," the Vermilion City researcher suggested, not wanting to face the Pokémon head-on. "It's hard to do that when the only way we've managed to deal damage is by getting close," his childhood friend replied. "Well, if you have any other ideas, Chloe, then I'd love to hear them," Go snarked back, slightly ticked off. While the two friends started arguing about what they should do, Regieleki still hadn't left them off the hook, and quickly brought the fight back to them, rushing to Cinderace, Tyrantrum and Eevee with extreme speed once more. Peonia was paying enough attention to tell her rock type to use Protect, but Cinderace and Eevee on the other hand could do nothing but simply take the hit, both of them seriously starting to feel the pain of the moves by their opponent. "Okay, can we all calm down and focus please? I got an idea," Peonia started off, bringing her two companions' attention back to the battle as she spoke in a serious tone. "Since Regieleki is way too fast,
we have to limit the places it could go so it's an easier target. Let's make Eevee and Tyrantrum corner it with our moves, then Cinderace can have an easier target with Pyro Ball, got it?
A bit shocked by her unusually assertive tone, the two Vermilion City trainers were slightly taken aback, but nevertheless nodded in agreement. Good, Tyrantrum. Surround it with Rock Slide. Chloe, lend me a hand, the blonde-haired girl said.
At Paonia's command, Chloe told Eevee to follow Tyrantrum's lead and try to surround their target with giant rocks falling from the sky.
The Regieleki tried to run away, but Go saw that coming, and ordered Cinderace to keep it busy by chasing it with quick attack. Whilst it didn't manage to hit the target, the fire type successfully distracted the Regieleki enough to give Chloe and Paonia's Pokémon enough time to completely trap the Regi Pokémon within rocks. Seeing his chance, Go told Cinderace to jump and fire some Pyro Balls from up above. The Strike Pokémon managed to get a couple hits in before the Regieleki forced its way out from within the rocks, only to unfortunately be met by a tackle from Eevee and a Dragon Claw from Tyrantrum, as the travelers were finally using their superior numbers to their advantage. A relatively even exchange of moves occurred in the next minutes, the Regieleki still showing a lot more power and speed than its opponents, but Chloe, Go and Paonia were now doing a way better job to cop with it than earlier, to the point where Paonia managed to get a lucky flinch onto Regieleki, and the three Pokémon went all in. It's flinching, now's our chance, Paonia shouted, telling her friends it's time to attack. Let's combine our moves, Go suggested, trying to deal as much damage with a single attack. Pyro Ball. Copy it Eevee. Mix it with Ancient Power.
Cinderace started it all off by quickly juggling a rock and shooting it like a soccer ball towards the still flinching Regieleki. Eevee did the same, her tail illuminating a bright orange as she similarly picked up a pebble and fired it with its tail side by side with Cinderace's move. Tyrantrum topped it all off by forming a giant silver ball in front of its body, and launching it just behind the two rocks of fire, creating some sort of fiery mix, all of their moves combining into one. Regieleki, finally recovering from its flinched state and knowing it couldn't dodge, simply launched a thunderbolt in response, creating a stalemate of power in the middle of the room as a huge explosion accompanied by a booming noise occurred. The humans and Pokémon alike struggled to stay on their feet, and soon noticed the floor under them started to crack as a result of the pressure being exerted by all of their moves colliding.
Guys, this doesn't look so good, Go warned, even though it was not hard to notice. Yeah, no kidding. Shouted back the Vermilion City trainer's two companions simultaneously, obviously noticing the ground crumbling beneath them.
It only took a couple more seconds before the solid ground completely collapsed on them, a huge black pit forming just beneath their feet, and Go was unfortunate enough to fall into a seemingly endless pit of nothingness, letting out a scream of terror in the process.
Reacting fast, Cinderace quickly dove after its trainer and grabbed his arm, only to be pulled in himself. This created a sequence of events in which everybody tried to grab onto somebody else falling into the abyss, only to fall in themselves. Eventually, Paonia, after Chloe's, Eevee's, Tyrantrum's and Cinderace's failed attempts of saving Go, managed to grab a hold of a solid surface and grab onto Chloe at the same time, forming a long line of human and Pokémon grabbing onto each other. What is it with this trip and falling down things? Go screamed from all the way down as the last person dangling in the pit. The Galar native keeping everybody up struggled to hang on, but was pushing through, and was almost managing to pull herself to safety, except a familiar Pokémon had other plans. Regieleki smugly floated over in front of her and seemingly laughed at the state they were in, and slowly approached Paonia's only hand keeping the group from completely falling down the hole, menacing to make her lose her grip. Paonia angrily gritted her teeth, and slowly said, "Don't even think about it," she practically growled. Unfortunately for her, Regieleki didn't have the sympathy to care about their situation, and aggressively pushed her hand off the ledge, finally making her lose her grip and causing the snake formation below her to completely fall into the abyss. Regieleki made some incomprehensible noises before following them down the pit. 10 minutes prior, despite being indoors, Ash could feel a trail of wind gushing past him as he and his starter Pokémon kept falling into a land of uncertainty. As he let his body relax through the abyss, Ash pondered for a second why this exact situation kept happening to him, and asked himself just how he somehow always ends up descending down an edge. He could have easily called out his other Pokémon to help him out just like last time this happened to him, but his mind was too preoccupied by other things to think up another crazy solution to his repeated problem. Still falling, Ash closed his eyes in resentment towards himself, as an image of Chloe's helpless and shocked face right after he told Pikachu to use Electro Web flashed in his mind. He knew he had done the right thing. It was safer to let himself and Pikachu go down than possibly bring her down with him, but he just knew, she hated his decision, something which didn't sit well with Ash at all.
Ash, the Pallet Town trainer heard in his mind, sending shivers down his spine at the sheer terror in Chloe's voice when she uttered those words just moments ago.
I messed up, didn't I? Ash said softly to himself, eyes still closed. He let his body relax once more, trying not to think about the situation. The slight breeze he was sensing was quite nice after all. Pikachu. Oh shoot. Due to his mind wandering, Ash had somehow forgotten he was still possibly falling to his death at the very moment, and let out a panicked scream. Pikachu, falling just next to him, quickly remembered just how much of a predicament they were in and frantically pointed down below with his little paws, where the approaching hard ground could already be seen. Knowing that at this point there was nothing he could do since he had reacted much too late, Ash quickly enveloped Pikachu in his arms and turned his back to the ground whilst closing his eyes, hoping to absorb most of the damage from the fall in an attempt to at least salvage his best friend. Pikachu was the last thing the Alolan champion heard before he felt his back collide with something soft. Expecting to hit the hard surface, it took a while for Ash to figure out he actually had a much softer landing than expected. After a couple of seconds of confusion, Ash reopened his eyes to find out he had in fact landed, but instead of the expected solid concrete, he had actually landed in a conveniently placed stash of hay. Glad to see you finally join me, Ketchum. Brandon suddenly said a little further away from Ash and Pikachu, the experienced battler looking up ahead, whilst the trainer and Pokémon looked at the Regi master confusingly. Although you might want to move from there.
Ash changed his field of vision to see what Brandon was talking about, and his eyes quickly widened when he saw the familiar floating orb of Regidrago charging up a purple beam from one of its arms. It didn't take long for Ash to realize it was actually aiming for him and Pikachu, so he hurriedly dove out of the way alongside his mouse Pokémon, landing roughly just next to the now scattered haystack. He quickly dusted himself off and ran to Brandon, who was standing behind his Registeel.
You really have a knack for falling off things, don't you? Brandon jokingly said, probably not too appropriate for the situation.
Very funny, Ash replied in a dead tone. Care to explain why these Pokémon are so mad at us? The Pyramid King frowned and looked back at Regidrago as he went back to a serious tone.
I'm thinking that since Regieleki and Regidrago supposedly haven't had any contact with anybody but themselves for the past who knows how many decades, they probably don't know how to react to unfamiliar faces, so their first instinct is to attack. On top of that, I'm assuming by how the temple reacted to us all jumping on the dots at the same time that we weren't actually supposed to awaken them like that, so they probably have a little grudge against us for suddenly disturbing them irregularly.
Well, that's just great, the hyper-class trainer thought out loud sarcastically before sighing. So, what's your plan now?
Brandon smirked uncharacteristically at Ash's question and declared, we do what we've been doing so far, we battle it. Ash and Pikachu simultaneously blinked a couple of times, making sure they heard Brandon correctly, before the young trainer said, Didn't you say just a few minutes ago that Regidrago was so strong it had to be sealed away because the people feared the destruction it was capable of? And you want to battle it? Do you have any better ideas? Aye. Despite trying to reason with Brandon for a better way out of this situation, Ash understood the fact that realistically all they could really do as of now was to battle the Dragon-type Pokémon, since they were stuck in who knows which part of the temple with no exit, and eventually gave in. Fine, Pikachu, let's go. Pikachu! The Pokémon exclaimed as he leapt out in front of Ash, landing next to Registeel. Thunderbolt. Flash Cannon. The two moves, courtesy of Pikachu and Registeel, were launched at the opposing Regidrago, who surprisingly decided to take the pair of attacks without replying back with an attack of its own. The
Regidrago staggered back quite a bit from the combination of the moves, clearly not expecting such powerful moves from the strangers. It quickly floated back to where it was and decided to take the fight to the foreigners and rushed towards them, its jaw-like hands suddenly turning into large claws, preparing a dragon claw.
Match it with Iron Tail, Ash ordered, as his buddy equally rushed towards the floating red orb. The two Pokémon collided with their moves, and to the absolute shock of Ash, Pikachu was immediately sent flying to the opposite wall, leaving a dent in said wall, and falling to the ground hard. Pikachu! Ash shouted out, as he saw his partner slowly picking himself up from the ground, clearly feeling the effects of the abnormally strong Dragon Claw. What on earth is that power? Brandon frowned, equally shook, before replying. I don't know, the attack seemed a lot more powerful than it should have. Whatever the reason, let's keep our distance, catch him. Right. Thunderbolt again Pikachu. Don't let it dodge. Pika Pie. The electric mouse replied as it shot out another powerful thunderbolt. The Regi Pokémon opted to try and dodge the move this time, and quickly started floating around in an attempt to outrun Pikachu's constant bolt of electricity. Force it in a corner so Brandon has an opening, Ash suddenly ordered. He knew it would just be a waste of stamina to have Pikachu follow Regidrago with a thunderbolt aimlessly, so he decided to have Pikachu force it to the back right corner of the room so Brandon had a free attack. Regidrago seemed to fall for the plan, as Pikachu had successfully pushed it to the end of the room after a while, so Brandon decided to take his chance. Hyper Beam Registeel. The Pokémon in question made some familiar incomprehensible noises and launched a giant beam from the braille pattern on its chest. Regidrago, being backed in a corner, could only take the hit, and a huge explosion occurred. All right. That must have done some damage, cheered Ash, as he foolishly thought they had successfully managed to land a powerful hit. After the dust settled, reality was revealed, and Regidrago appeared just fine, if not better than it was before the move.
What? How? Look closer, catch him. Brandon simply told him. Ash took a second glance and quickly realized what had happened thanks to the fact the Regi Pokémon was glowing orange and spinning on itself. The red orb Pokémon had absorbed the damage by using Dragon Dance, while at the same time boosting its attack power and speed. Having used Dragon Dance in a similar fashion a while back with Dragonite, Ash still felt like something was off.
But even if it did use Dragon Dance to protect itself, there's no way it should have been able to absorb all of the damage, right?
That I will admit, something's not right here. Ignoring the confused state of the opposing trainers and Pokémon, Regidrago attacked them once more with Dragon Claw, rushing towards Pikachu.
Quick attack to dodge it. The electric type did just that and started running around the room in an attempt to dodge the Dragon Claw. The Dragon Orb Pokémon, realizing that even with its boost in speed it would be pointless to chase after Pikachu because of its naturally low speed, quickly changed trajectory to Brandon's Registeel instead. Watch out Brandon, Ash warned, realizing Regidrago's plan. Knowing he couldn't dodge because Registeel was also very slow, the Pyramid King had no choice but to meet the attack head-on. Block it with Iron Head. Instinctively shout out the Regi Master. Registeel became coated in a white aura before slamming its head directly against the Dragon Claw. Some sparks of friction appeared momentarily between the clash of moves before Regidrago suddenly glowed a peculiar purple color, something that didn't go unnoticed by Ash, and overpowered the Iron Pokémon, sending it flying in the other direction, only stopping when it met the hard concrete wall. Whilst Brandon gritted his teeth, Ash narrowed his eyes on the Regidrago, who had just stopped glowing purple. That's odd, maybe that has something to do with its boosted power. Ash's train of thought was interrupted by the Pyramid King, warning him that the mysterious Regi Pokémon was going for Pikachu next. Ash narrowed his eyes at the incoming Pokémon and noticed its arms started glowing white, signaling the Regidrago was planning on using Hammer Arm. Pikachu had already started running, since it obviously didn't want to face it head-on again, but Ash had other ideas. Pikachu. The electric type's ears perked up as he kept running. Stop and match it with Iron Tail. Pikachu's eyes widened slightly, not really wanting to do what its trainer ordered considering Regidrago had completely outpowered him last time, but nevertheless, Pikachu quickly switched directions and jumped towards Regidrago with a cry, its tail glowing a shiny silver before matching the Hammer Arm. Pikachu let out a little surprised cry, as it realized that the attack was a lot weaker than the Dragon Claw from earlier, despite the fact Hammer Arm is probably the stronger move normally. In fact, the difference in power was so notable that Pikachu managed to keep Regidrago in a stalemate, allowing Brandon another chance at a free move. Focus Punch! Shouted out the Pyramid King, as Registeel quickly ran up to the Dragon Orb Pokémon, its fist glowing a bright white, and landed a powerful punch onto Regidrago, making the Pokémon stagger back. Ash frowned again. I don't get it. Why was Pikachu able to match a hammer arm, but against a dragon claw it wasn't even close? There has to be another factor in play here.
Ash's face suddenly lit up, and he quickly asked Brandon a question. Brandon, is there anything in the old myths that talks about Regidrago's ability?
The Regi master seemed a bit surprised by the question and put a hand on his chin in a thinking manner. Not directly, but I think I know where you're going with this. Then that must be it. It probably has an ability that boosts dragon moves. That's why that hammer arm seems so much weaker than the other moves, and probably why Dragon Dance was even more powerful than usual. You're most likely right. Okay, here's the plan, Brandon said before explaining to Ash his idea. The Alolan champion nodded at his peer's words and exclaimed. Gotcha. All right Pikachu, charge in with quick attack. Pikachu! Exclaimed Ash's best friend, as in a blink of an eye he dashed forward towards the Regidrago. Brandon implied a similar idea by ordering Registeel to get close with Iron Head. Pikachu, being the faster Pokémon, approached the Regidrago first. The Dragon Orb Pokémon launched a dragon energy at the general direction of the opposing Pokémon, who avoided it with relative ease since they were still quite a distance away. As Pikachu got even closer, Regidrago, thinking the tiny mouse was going to hit it straight on again, prepared to strike the electric type with a dragon claw from its right jaw-like hand. The dragon-type Pokémon swung its arm, only to be surprised by the fact Pikachu had simply dodged out of the way, making it miss completely. In the moment of shock, Regidrago failed to notice that Registeel was right behind the mouse charging towards it at full speed with an iron head. Not having the time to think, the dragon-type Regi Pokémon quickly used a hammer arm with its other arm to block the incoming move, forcing it to stay still. Little did it know, it was exactly what Ash and Brandon were hoping for. Now's your chance Pikachu. Thunderbolt, full power, shouted Ash. Pikachu quickly jumped and shot a bright bolt of electricity at Regidrago, knowing it couldn't move. Unluckily for the humans, Regidrago wasn't going to let it be beaten so easily. Just before the Thunderbolt hit it, Regidrago quickly charged up a Dragon Claw with its other free arm thanks to the added boost of speed from Dragon Dance and pushed Registeel in between it and Pikachu, making it so that Registeel was the one to take the electric-type move. Because of being simultaneously hit by Thunderbolt and Dragon Claw, Registeel couldn't handle the powerful moves and subsequently fainted. Registeel! Worriedly screamed out Brandon, seeing its loyal Pokémon no longer be able to battle. Ash was equally stunned by Regidrago's quick thinking and failed to notice the dragon energy being shot out by Regidrago aimed straight at Pikachu, who could only stand and take it. Pikachu! Ash screeched out, as he saw his first Pokémon be hit by the abnormally powerful dragon-type move and be sent flying once more. The trainer instinctively took off for the direction his partner was going and managed to catch him mid-air, but because of the overwhelming force, Ash skidded back quite a lot, only stopping once he reached the back wall of the room, colliding harshly against it and forcing him to the floor. Ash, despite being in a lot of pain, quickly checked his partner's condition. Pikachu, he whispered softly, seeing his partner badly hurt. Pikapi, was all Pikachu responded in a faint voice. You rest up well buddy, we'll take care of the rest. The Pallet Town native swiftly placed his partner Pokémon next to him, the electric type leaning on the wall, and Ash quickly dusted himself off and got up from the floor. He walked over to Brandon, the man in question recalling his Registeel, and said, Man, it sure is strong. They weren't lying when they said these Pokémon were so strong they had to be sealed away, thought out loud the man in response. Ash looked at the ceiling mindlessly and chuckled, You can say that ag. The hyperclass trainer suddenly interrupted himself once he noticed cracks start to form from the ceiling just above them and asked Brandon, why you see that too right? The Pyramid King nodded and said the obvious, we should probably move before. Brandon wasn't even able to finish his sentence as debris had already started falling from the ceiling. The two trainers quickly dove out of the way right before the ceiling completely collapsed onto them, and what followed was the blurry sight of a yellow figure, who zoomed across the room in a flash, only stopping once it had reached Regidrago, finally allowing the trainers to analyze the figure. Regieleki? Ash questioned, almost forgetting it was also in the temple, just before two more familiar Pokémon landed just in front of him and Brandon. Wait, Cinderace and Tyrantrum too. He added, surprised by his friend's Pokemon's sudden appearance, the pair barely paying attention to Ash's shock, instead focusing their eyes intently at the Regieleki. Cinderace and Tyrantrum looked pretty roughed up, so Ash and Brandon deduced pretty quickly they had been doing some battling of their own. The next thing the pair of experienced trainers heard were two screams coming from above, and it didn't take a genius to figure out the origins of the voices. Some help would be great right about now, Cinderace. Tyrant please. Screamed out the familiar voices of Go and Peonia respectively, the pair practically begging for their Pokemon's aid. Cinderace, noticing its beloved trainer in distress, quickly went just under him and caught Go right before he hit the ground, and Tyrantrum did the same by catching Peonia. The two humans both exhaled as their Pokemon placed them back on a stable surface. Oh, hey guys, Go and Peonia said simultaneously with a lack of enthusiasm, noticing they had reunited with Ash and Brandon. Ash immediately noticed the lack of a certain maroon-haired girl and asked worriedly about said girl. Where's Chloe? Go and Peonia looked at each other confused for a brief moment, since they were certain Chloe had fallen alongside them, and then looked up, and the sight of Chloe and Eevee falling together could be seen. The screeches of panic from both the trainer and Pokemon were deafening to the ear.
Ash, without a second of doubt, quickly shifted himself in a position so he would be just beneath Chloe, and thankfully, the hyper-class trainer managed to catch the girl bridal style and Eevee managed to land in Go's arms somewhat safely.
There was a slight moment of awkwardness, as Ash and Chloe, the girl still in the guy's arm, simply blinked at each other. A stiff giggle from Peonia was finally the thing to break the silence. Bit early for that, don't you think, guys? Peonia joked, not being able to contain the urge to tease the two in their current position. A bright crimson covered both of their faces as Ash instinctively dropped Chloe to the floor in embarrassment. The boy quickly went to apologize. You are sorry about that, Chloe. Out of all the reactions possible from the Vermilion City girl, a slap to the face was probably the last thing Ash was expecting, and from the widened eyes of Go, Peonia and Brandon, the others weren't either. The Alolan champion quickly rubbed his hand on his cheek, clearly feeling the sting from the unexpected slap. I probably deserve that. That was for both dropping me to the floor and for using a move on me earlier, Chloe shouted at her crush, before adding. I would scream at you even more right now for how selfish you are, but we should probably deal with the two Pokemon first. Right. Ash conceded, not really looking forward to a future conversation with the Vermilion City girl, but happy nonetheless she was fine. Go gently dropped Eevee to the floor, the normal type quickly running to its maroon-haired trainer, and visibly frowned once he changed his sight to the two Pokemon in front of the group and said, I don't know how you guys fared, but started off the young trainer, specifically addressing Ash and Brandon. Regieleki has been giving us a hard time. We may have done some decent damage, but it's way too fast for us to do just about anything, so we can barely get a move in. Sounds like the complete opposite of us, Brandon noted. Regidrago's pretty slow from what we've seen, but it hits hard. It knocked out Pikachu and Registeel without too much trouble. Just great, Peonia sighed, before mentioning something strange they had figured about Regieleki. On top of that, for whatever reason, when using its electric moves, Regieleki gets this strange glow that makes it way stronger. Ash's eyes widened and he quickly exclaimed. The same thing has been happening with Regidrago and its dragon-type moves. We figured out it's probably because of its ability, so if Regidragos supposedly boost dragon moves, it would make sense Regieleki's would boost electric moves. Well, that's great that you guys figured it out and all, but how exactly do we deal with it? Chloe asked, hoping they had figured out a way to counter their boost in power. Ash and Brandon looked at each other uneasily before the Pyramid King responded. Tough to say. We tried baiting Regidrago into using a non-dragon type move so we'd have an opening, but we haven't had much success. Fantastic. Go said out loud. So what? Are we just screwed now? Everybody would have liked to contradict Go's words, but nobody could quite find what to reply. Their situation was quite dire after all, and everything they tried just seemed to come to nothing. Chloe, seeing the uncharacteristical downed mood from everybody, determinedly tried to motivate them again. Come on guys. We aren't going to give up, are we? We've got Pokemon still by our side, we can do this. They might be strong, but that just means we're going to have to be stronger. We've faced so many things on this trip already and always got out of it, so we just have to do it again. At Chloe's word, Brandon quickly shook his head, irritated with himself. He was acting just like the younger trainers, giving up way too early when nothing was over at all. He had grown out of that phase as a trainer long ago, and as the leader of the group and an experienced battle frontier brain, he couldn't let that happen again. The girl's right, we're being stupid here, Brandon admitted. The intimidating nature of the Galar myths had brought the childish mentality out of him, and he knew he was better than that. Guess it showed he still wasn't a perfect trainer himself. Regieleki and Regidrago are Pokemon, just like the ones we have by our side, so we just have to be better and smarter than them, simple as that. He quickly detached a Pokeball from his belt and released it, revealing his Regirock. At the sight of Brandon's powerful legendary Pokemon, Go seemed to regain his composure as well, realizing his two companions were speaking truthfully. You're right, we're better than this, no point in being down when the battle has barely even started. Yeah. Let's show these Regis just who they're messing with, Peonia added, motivated once more. Now we're talking. Chloe cheered, glad to see her companions back to normal. She turned to see the only member of the group who hadn't spoken up yet, Ash. The trainer in question chuckled, before saying, you know, it's crazy how you, the least experienced out of all of us, is the one to motivate us. Not my fault none of you weren't thinking straight, she replied back. Can't argue with that, Ash smirked before pulling out a Pokeball. Alright Lucario, let's show them the product of our training. A flash of light occurred alongside the appearance of Ash's familiar Lucario, who let out a battle cry as he stared down an unfamiliar pair of opponents. Alright, listen up everyone. Brandon started off, back to his assertive tone. Ash and Peonia can start by focusing on Regieleki, Go and I will focus on Regidrago, and Chloe, you and Eevee do what you do best and copy some moves. Everybody nodded confidently at Brandon's words, remotivated to best their opponents. Peonia specifically stared down the Regieleki, the Pokemon seemingly staring back, and all whilst keeping eye contact with the Electron Pokemon. She spoke to her idol and new friend. Ash, I'm warning you. I got a personal bone to pick with this Regieleki, so try to keep up will ya? Peonia said sarcastically whilst stretching her arm, ready for payback on the Regi Pokemon. You of all people should know that I will, Ash replied with a grin. Let's rock everyone. Aura Sphere. Rock Slide. Ash and Peonia took no time to get started and immediately launched the moves courtesy of Lucario and Tyrantrum respectively. Regieleki, now at least a little familiar with one of its opponents, knew better than to take the move head-on and dodged the incoming attacks by using extreme speed to easily dash out of the way. Go. Brandon and Chloe opted for a similar strategy and just tried to deal some chip damage to start off, with Cinderace firing a Pyro Ball in sync with Eevee, and Regirock letting loose a Hyper Beam. Contrary to its electric friend, Regidrago decided to match the moves head-on, the colliding moves exploding and creating a smokescreen in the center of the room blocking everyone's vision. As everybody was blinded by the smoke, Ash knew he already had the advantage thanks to his Pokemon's capabilities. Rush into the smoke Lucario and find Regieleki. The steel type immediately sprinted into the smokescreen at its trainer's command, its eyes flaring a bright blue color, and used its aura abilities to locate the opposing trainer fairly easily. Once it found its target, he quickly charged a Force Palm in his left hand, and Regieleki, not being able to see a thing, was sent into the air above the smoke, giving a certain Pokemon a free shot. Ancient Power Tyrantrum. A familiar blonde-haired girl ordered as she took the chance offered by Lucario's assistants to snipe the Electron Pokemon mid-air with a giant silver ball. The Regi Pokemon could only stand and take it, being projected all the way into the ceiling after making contact with Tyrantrum's move. Bullseye. Peonia cheered. On the other side of the room, Brandon had also thought to locate its opponent through the smoke, using his famous lock-on strategy. Regirock made a familiar yet incomprehensible noise to signify to its trainer it had found a target. Stone Edge. Follow the move you two. The Pyramid King shouted, specifically talking to Go and Chloe. The two Vermilion City trainers did what they were told and Chloe ordered her Eevee to copy Regirock's move and Go told Cinderace to chase the rocks with Blaze Kick. Blinded just like its companion, Regidrago couldn't tell where the moves were coming from, and eventually got hit by back-to-back Stone Edges. Surprised by the combo of same moves, The red orb Pokemon didn't notice Cinderace right behind the rocks charging up fire in its right leg and kicking it with the fiery move, causing it to stagger back quite a lot. At this point, the smoke had finally dispersed. The two opposing Regis, having taken quite some damage, decided to stop playing around. If the strangers wanted a fight, they were going to get it. Regi commenced their counterattack by setting up electric terrain, surrounding everyone in the room in a yellow dome. Regi opted for another boost in power and speed as it used Dragon Dance, and the two orb Pokemon rushed towards their opponents. Regi started crackling with energy and launched two Thunderbolts whilst still rushing Lucario and Tyrantrum, and the two trainers did their best to avoid it. Double Team. Protect. Ash and Peonia gave their commands to Lucario and Tyrantrum respectively, with the Aura Pokemon creating multiple copies of itself to avoid the bolt of lightning and the Despot Pokemon simply blocking it with a green shield. Unfortunately for the pair, they had failed to notice it was but a mere distraction, as the Thunderbolts gave Regi enough time to float above the group in the blink of an eye due to its unmatched speed and start building up a Thunder Cage. Peonia, having seen how powerful the move was before, quickly gave instructions to her Pokemon. Tyrantrum, get out of there. Ash, watch out, the blonde-haired girl tried to warn. Since Ash didn't know what the move did, he ignorantly ordered Lucario to use Aura Sphere. The bipedal Pokemon's copies of itself disappeared and it quickly built up a blue sphere in its paws and sent it towards the Regi above it. Just as it looked as the move was about to connect, the electric-type Regi Pokemon poured down a barrage of bolts of electricity onto Lucario, quickly destroying the Aura Sphere in its path and dealing massive damage. Lucario worriedly screamed out the Alolan champion. The move looked like it did quite a lot of damage, especially with the electric terrain, and Lucario struggled to pick itself up after being knocked down by the attack. What on Arceus is that move? He asked. Still don't know, but whatever it is, I'd recommend dodging it next time, Peonia replied. Slightly distracted by Ash's surprise, she failed to notice Regi get on the move again, running into Tyrantrum multiple times with extreme speed, the Galar native's Pokemon being forced to just tank the hits as Lucario slowly regained his strength. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Regi didn't waste any time in putting the pressure on Brandon, Chloe and Go. The Dragon-type Regi Pokemon had started off by launching a Dragon Energy towards the trainer's Pokemon. The Pyramid King had warned the two other trainers to avoid the move at all cost, so they did what they were told and commanded their Pokemon to dodge the move. Regi wasn't done yet in the slightest though as it rushed the three opposing Pokemon with a Dragon Claw one by one. Chloe's Eevee was its first victim, as the evolution Pokemon foolishly tried to match it, ending in disaster for the normal type as it was easily overpowered with the help of Regidrago's ability. Cinderace tried to keep its distance and launched a couple Pyro Balls from afar, landing a few good hits in the process, but the Dragon Orb Pokemon pushed through and eventually landed a direct hit onto Go's starter. Finally, Brandon ordered his Regirock to stop it in its track by using Stone Edge, but even that wasn't enough to stop Regidrago, as the Pokemon simply destroyed any pillar in its path and striked Regirock dead on with a third Dragon Claw. The three humans were left stunned at the sight of three of their Pokemon getting completely overwhelmed by the mysterious Pokemon, with Go commenting, "Why, you weren't kidding when you said they were strong." A simple nod from Brandon was all he got as a response. The trio of trainers temporarily diverted their attention towards Ash and Peonia after hearing the constant damage being dealt by Regilaki's extreme speed, noticing the two trainers were struggling as well. After a few more moments of Ash and Peonia desperately trying anything to deal with Regilaki's speed, the Electron Pokemon oddly retreated back to the middle of room, and Regidrago did the same, the two Pokemon now side by side. Ash, Peonia and their respective Pokemon quickly rushed to the rest of their group, worried about the Regis' next move. "Sheesh, I never expected them to be this strong," Ash confessed, surprised by the excessive power they had. "You can say that again, we can barely get a good hit on them before our Pokemon are just overpowered," Go added on to Ash's thought. "Let's fight as a group from now on, we're going to need all the teamwork we can," Brandon said, switching up the strategy to the unanimous agreement of everyone. The group of trainers alongside their pretty roughed-up Pokemon stared down the two Regis on the other side of the room. The pair of mysterious Pokemon made some incomprehensible noises, seemingly trying to communicate with each other, and soon after their bodies started glowing their respective colors, as they prepared a pair of powerful attacks. That doesn't look very good, Chloe stated the obvious. Fortunately for the group, it was just about time for Ash to come up with something to turn the tides. Alright. Ash started off, turning his signature cap around before announcing, I got an idea. Yes. Finally. A moment of silence occurred, as Peonia suddenly cut Ash off rather loudly, and the group turned and looked at the Galar native strangely. Even the Regis on either side of the field froze up for a second at the sudden shout from one of the strangers. Peonia quickly covered up her mouth, as she didn't mean to say that out loud, and sheepishly explained. Oops, sorry. It's just whenever you say that and turn your cap, it usually means you've come up with some sort of insane strategy to suddenly get back into a battle. Ash briefly looked at his other companions, all wearing the same baffled look, and blinked before saying, how do you know what, I'm not even going to ask. The Alolan champion said before sighing, then resumed explaining his idea. Anyways, Chloe, Peonia and Brandon, you keep them distracted with long-ranged moves. Go. I'm going to need the help of you and Cinderace. You got it, Ash! Exclaimed the young Vermilion City researcher, as he and his Pokémon gave the hyperclass trainer a confident smirk, making the latter chuckle. Around this time, the Regis had finished building up their attack, and launched a powerful Thunderbolt and Dragon Energy at the group, prompting the travelers to simultaneously give the same order. Dodge it. Expecting the moves, the travelers' Pokémon managed to evade the attacks, as the yellow and purple beams for the Regi Pokémon were launched straight into the wall, making a huge dent.
Chloe did a double take on the impact of the moves from Regieleki and Regidrago, now really happy they hadn't decided to match them head-on. Orders from Brandon and Peonia quickly snapped her out of her surprised state though, and she quickly said, Eevee, copy Tyrantrum's ancient power. Her Pokémon loyally obeyed the command, summoning a giant silver ball in front of her similarly to Tyrantrum, and them alongside Brandon's Regirock kept Regieleki and Regidrago occupied, making the two orb Pokémons forced to dodge the attacks, leaving Ash and Go an opening to approach the Regis. Charge in Lucario. You too, Cinderace. The two Pokémon dashed off towards their opponents, Lucario in particular radiating aura as he ran. Ash had got an idea, seeing the two Pokémon they were facing were completely opposite, meaning they weren't totally in sync with each other, so Ash had thought that maybe if they managed to make them battle close together, they would eventually mess each other up since they weren't on the same page, with Regieleki mostly attacking in favor of its excessive speed but less powerful attacks, whilst Regidrago favored staying still and attacking with powerful moves. Seeing Lucario and Cinderace getting close to their target, Ash tried to confuse the two opponents. Double team, surround them. Go. Noticing what Ash was trying to do, ordered his Pokémon to act accordingly. Quick attack, annoy them as much as you can. Regieleki and Regidrago, being too preoccupied by the other Pokémon's constant barrage of moves, barely noticed Lucario formed a dozen or so copies of itself and surrounded them. Not really knowing what to do, the two Regi Pokémons tried to get rid of the copies, except they struggled with a certain fire type constantly running into them with quick attack. Frustrated by a mixture of things, Regieleki decided to take things into its own hands and suddenly rushed Cinderace with an extreme speed, quickly catching up to the striker Pokémon. Meanwhile, after firing a couple dragon energies to keep Chloe, Brandon and Peonia's Pokémons at bay, Regidrago chased after Lucario. During this time, Lucario and Cinderace looked at each other and gave a nod, before quickly shifting directions towards their counterpart. The Regidrago and Regieleki were still chasing both Lucario and Cinderace respectively, as the latter two were seemingly about to run into each other, but their trainers were ready, and just before they made contact, their trainers said, Use Force Palm on the ground, slide under them, Cinderace. In the blink of an eye, Lucario propelled itself into the air with the use of a Force Palm, and Cinderace slid on the ground. The two Regi Pokémons, obviously not expecting this, inevitably collided into each other, giving the travelers a perfect opportunity to strike. Now Aura Sphere. The Aura Pokémon quickly turned around mid-air and shot out a blue sphere of energy towards the two stunned Regis from up above. Pyro Ball. Cinderace, thanks to its speed and agility, swiftly jumped, turned around and launched a burning rock towards Regieleki and Regidrago all in a single motion. Hyper Beam. Rock Slide. Aura Sphere. Added Regirock, Tyrantrum and Eevee, launching a move of their own towards the mysterious Pokémon, who were not able to dodge the attack and were sent flying into the wall.
Awesome you guys. Go complimented as he gave Ash a high five after the group successfully dealt some good damage to the Regis. Brandon, Peonia and Chloe quickly joined the two young trainers, Pokemon by their side. They silently watched the smoke of the explosion clear to check the state of the mysterious Regi Pokemon. Regieleki and Regidrago looked pretty damaged, but were still more than capable to fight, noted by screeches coming from them, much to the dismay of the trainers, Peonia even letting out a grunt of annoyance. Can they just faint already, she complained. The two Regis unfortunately had other plans and Regieleki looked to be setting up another electric terrain, despite the field already being covered in electricity, greatly confusing the opposing trainers. What exactly is Regieleki doing? Chloe first asked. It looks to be trying to use electric terrain, but the room already has that effect, Go replied, not sure himself. Brandon had a questioning look on his face, also confused at what Regieleki was doing, but his look quickly became one of urgency as he finally clocked what it was planning, his eyes widening at the realization. It's trying to let out a discharge of energy, brace yourselves. Realizing the danger they were now in, Peonia, acting instinctively, shouted out, Protect Tyrant RUM. A green shield quickly engulfed the trainers and Pokemon, as Regieleki released a huge amount of electricity, causing the entire room to shake. The Electron Pokemon had used the energy dispersed when using electric terrain similarly to how the move Discharge is used, except it wasn't only aiming for the Pokemon, but the trainers as well. Tyrantrum's shield luckily was up before the move electrocuted both the Pokemon and humans, though the sheer power of the attack from the Electron Pokemon was causing the shield to slowly break. That on top of the ground shaking was enough to greatly worry just about everyone. Not good, not good, not good. Go screamed out in a panic, struggling for what felt like the millionth time this trip to stay on his feet. I'm really starting to be grateful you TEACHED your TYRANTRUM protect PEONIA. Chloe admitted to a similar state as Go. Well thanks but this shield isn't going to last long, the blonde-haired girl warned, as she silently hoped, just like against the Greedent at the Dynatree, a mysterious mythical or legendary Pokemon would come to help them. Unfortunately that was not going to be the case, as the only legendary Pokemon in proximity were the two currently trying to hurt them, as Regieleki kept pouring out an endless amount of electricity. The shield was continuously starting to break, and Brandon even pointed out another horrible thing for them. Regidrago's preparing something, he shouted in a deep voice, as his Regirock approached the end of the shield and prepared to limit the damage with iron defense, though even he knew that wasn't going to help much. As Regidrago could be seen charging up a dragon energy, most certainly powerful enough to completely shatter their defenses, Ash suddenly felt a familiar burst of aura. He quickly turned towards Lucario, and despite the bipedal Pokemon not doing anything of note, he felt something. The hyperclass trainer couldn't describe it. It wasn't like the times Lucario was trying to tell him something, it was different than that, but he didn't know what it was, and judging by Lucario's look, it didn't know either.
The Pallet Town trainer quickly glanced at Regidrago, who was just about to fire off its dragon energy, and Ash's heart rate was starting to skyrocket, forcing him to put a hand on his heart, but what he found especially strange was that he was almost certain it wasn't because of fear.
He looked back at Lucario, who once again seemed to be in a similar state, as Ash easily noted its breathing also started to get heavier. After a moment, Lucario suddenly gave a light nod to its trainer and its body started radiating an insane amount of aura. Finally, Regidrago launched its attack towards the group, and time for Ash froze instantly. The Alolan champion looked around in shock, as he was easily able to move, yet his friends were frozen solid. What's happening? His hands were starting to shake, not liking whatever was happening one bit, only for Lucario to let out a cry, alerting him, seemingly trying to tell him to relax. Ash, still confused, hesitated, but nevertheless tried to calm himself down. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was still incredibly worried and nervous, as even with the amount of strange experiences he had gone through he had never felt anything quite like this. Ash tried to shake the nervousness out of him, did his best to keep his cool, and let himself relax, just like Lucario seemingly told him to do. Unknowingly to the trainer, his breathing was slowly becoming in sync with Lucario's. Ash slowly started to feel his body glow, similarly to Lucario's aura. He started getting a strange feeling in his palms, almost as if the aura inside of him was building up energy. I can feel it, Ash thought to himself. Lucario's aura, this situation was slowly starting to remind him of something. It reminded him of that time he met Sir Aaron's Lucario back in Hoenn, and he formed an aura sphere using his gloves. The feeling he got in his hands back then was the same as now. Except this time, he didn't feel like he was using his own aura. He felt as if he was connecting with Lucario's, almost as if they were sharing their aura to become stronger. Ash smirked, feeling more and more aura radiate between him and Lucario. He could feel the energy seemingly bursting out of him and his Pokémon, which was definitely a strange feeling, but Ash kept his cool. He unconsciously put his hands together, and his Pokémon did the same. Ash didn't feel or sense anything else during this time. It was only him and Lucario, side by side, in complete sync, and Ash kept his eyes firmly shut. Despite this, he could vision the dragon energy coming towards them, and Ash felt the will of both him and his Pokémon to save everybody from harm. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity. Aura Shield! Instinctively shouted out Ash, he himself barely acknowledging the words that had just come out of his mouth. In the span of milliseconds, time went back to its normal state. Ash and Lucario's eyes shot open, both pairs flaring a bright blue, and the two, in complete sync, put their hands in front of them, one slightly above the other, and miraculously, a bright blue shield formed in front of them and the entire group. The dragon energy accompanied by the electric terrain discharge easily shattered Tyrantrum's shield, but came to a complete halt at Ash and Lucario's. The rest of the group, barely even realizing what had just happened, simply stood, in probably the most disbelief they've ever been in. A solid moment passed of complete silence. The only sound being heard was the friction between the dragon energy, Regieleku's electric terrain, and Ash and Lucario's shield holding firmly against the pair of moves. Chloe was the first person to have any sort of visible reaction. Ash? WWH, W what? The person in question didn't seem to be able to hear the girl, as he was completely focused on putting up a shield with Lucario's aid. Eventually, Regieleki and Regidrago got too tired to keep up the barrage of moves, and eventually let up. Ash and Lucario kept the shield up for a few more seconds after that, before slowly putting their hands back together, once again, in complete synchronicity, as if they were moving as one. Ash and Lucario's eyes slowly opened back up, returning to their regular colors, and soon after, the pair seemed to feel the effects of what just happened, and dropped to the ground, landing on one knee, completely exhausted. Chloe was the first one to check on Ash's condition. Ash, are you all right? She said, holding a bit of his weight. I think so. What on earth was that? Go shouted, not comprehending at all what just happened to him or Lucario. Honestly, I wish I could tell, but I genuinely have no idea. It was as if Lucario and I combined our aura and we just did that, Ash replied, slowly picking himself back up from the ground with the help of Chloe, before checking on Lucario's condition, who seemed to be somewhat okay. That wasn't an actual move, was it? Peonia asked generally, shook at what her idol just managed to do. If it was, I've definitely never seen it before, Brandon responded, doing the best out of the entire group to hide his shock. Well, Lucario, looks like we just learned a new move, Ash said whilst chuckling slightly. His Pokémon gave a light smile before shaking off the exhaustion he felt, getting back into a battling position. Ash did something similar, shaking himself to try and get rid of the sensation of exhaustion, and readjusting his cap to its regular position. The Regis, still a little stunned by what the strange human and Pokémon just managed to do, ignored their surprise and went straight back to attacking, with Regidrago charging straight for Tyrantrum. Peonia hadn't fully gotten back into the battle, and, consequently, her despot Pokémon got hit with a powerful dragon claw, sending it crashing into the wall alongside a huge explosion. Oh no! Tyrantrum! The blonde-haired trainer worriedly shouted out. Due to its fatigue of holding up the shield on top of all the battling it had already done, Tyrantrum fainted. Peonia slowly returned the Pokémon back to its Pokéball. Thanks, Tyrantrum. Take a nice rest. Before Peonia even had time to think, Regieleki had immediately dashed towards her. The rest of the group had realized Regieleki's intention and they each called out a move to stop the Electron Pokémon in its tracks, but Regidrago intercepted the attacks with a dragon energy. It seemed inevitable that Peonia was going to get tackled by the yellow floating blur until... Pikachu! Out of nowhere, another yellow blur, This time a more familiar one, suddenly tackled Regieleki just before it was about to collide with the Galar native, sending the electric-type Regi Pokemon flying, the Pokemon clearly not expecting the move. Pikachu swiftly landed in front of the girl, and gave a little cry alongside a confident smile, his cheeks sparkling of excess electricity. "Pikachu! Pikachu! Pikachu!" said Peonia, Ash and Go accordingly, all having different reactions to the mouse Pokemon's appearance. The electric type scratched the back of his head at the different reactions of the humans. Go was the first one out of all of them to say anything. "Where did you even come from, Pikachu? You're all good again." Ash completely ignored his research partner and bent down to greet his best friend, who was seemingly completely healed of the battle against Regidrago from earlier, strangely looking raring to go more than ever, with Pikachu running around in circles at extreme speeds with little sparks of lightning seemingly bursting out of its body. "Whoa. Slow down there, buddy, wouldn't want you to faint again." Chloe, having deduced Pikachu had been taken out by the Regidrago earlier, wondered how he had recovered enough energy to battle again, heck probably more so than it was before. "Wait, so, if you're saying Pikachu fainted against Regidrago, how does he have this much energy already? That was probably at most just 10 minutes ago, and I've never seen him this lively before." "I think I have an answer for that." Brandon suddenly perked up, gathering the attention of everyone. Regieleki using electric terrain the way it had earlier probably gave Pikachu an excessive amount of electricity, and since Regieleki is supposedly capable of fueling Galar's entire energy, it wouldn't be surprising if it's capable of recharging an electric type's energy. "Huh," was all Peonia said, before she bent down similarly to Ash as the mouse Pokemon quickly ran to her. "Well, thanks for saving me, Pikachu. I guess this forgives you for almost making me lose my mind earlier because you can't make a single decision." Pikachu decided to take this as a positive answer and let out an adorable cry before glancing at Ash. The two smiled and gave each other a nod, seemingly understanding what the other wanted, and the electric type swiftly placed itself defensively in front of Peonia as Ash retreated back to his Lucario, much to the confusion of the blonde-haired. Ash, what is Pikachu doing?" "You better watch out for Regieleki, it didn't seem to like that surprise attack from earlier," the hyperclass trainer cut off, not bothering to turn around to explain anything. What? Peonia, still confused, turned to her right only to find Regieleki charging up a thunderbolt on a crash course directly towards Pikachu. Instinctively, she said an oh-so-familiar phrase. Pikachu, use Thunderbolt." Pikachu loyally charged up his own Thunderbolt, way more powerful than before thanks to Regieleki's overdose of electricity, and met the Electron Pokemon's move head-on, causing a mini explosion in the middle of the room. Did I just command Ash's Pikachu?" Peonia proceeded to have a mini freak out, to the point where the rest of the group, and, heck, even the Regis started to question the girl's sanity. Ash, slightly disturbed at how excited she was, said, "It really isn't that big of a deal, Peonia." "Oh, but it is. I've dreamed of this moment for years. I feel so powerful, so unbeatable, so—" Her excitement was swiftly interrupted by a familiar bolt of lightning, courtesy of Pikachu, electrocuting her. Peonia promptly dropped to the floor fried, and, whilst slowly picking herself up from the ground, said, "I've also dreamed of this moment for years." Regieleki and Regidrago at this point had had enough of the interruptions and were getting impatient, so they rushed the group once more. Floating side by side, Regieleki started glowing a peculiar purple, and Regieleki a peculiar yellow. "Stone Edge, Blaze Kick," commanded Brandon and Go accordingly. The two opposing Regi Pokemon evaded the incoming pillars of rocks with relative ease, Regidrago slightly slowing down to slash the pillars into pieces, whilst Regieleki kept its speed and moved side to side. Seeing the Regieleki approaching, Cinderace built up fire in its right leg and swung, only for Regieleki to swiftly dodge it by flying above, causing the bunny to lose his balance. The Electron Pokemon then used Thunder Cage, unleashing a barrage of lightning bolts onto the striker Pokemon. Seeing her ally in trouble, Peonia ordered Pikachu to use Iron Tail on Regieleki to stop its attack. The mouse Pokemon jumped and was about to swing its tail, only to be blocked by the left arm of Regidrago, who then used Hammer Arm with its other arm to send the Pikachu crashing towards the ground. The Dragon Orb Pokemon then proceeded to attack Regirock, letting loose a Dragon Claw, which Brandon's Pokemon tried to block with little success, as his Pokémon was sent backwards due to the force of the move. Being the only ones not getting attacked, Ash and Chloe needed to find a way to regain the advantage. Chloe, we need to. Ash was cut off by Lucario and Eevee being brutally tackled back-to-back by Regieleku's extreme speed, the Pokémon having let Cinderace go for just a moment after seeing the two other young trainers not paying attention. Lucario! Eevee! Screamed out the two trainers. The two Pokémon bravely shook off the damage, but the impact it had was very visible. The two Regi Pokémons then retreated back after completing their series of attacks, knowing that if they got too close they would just get outnumbered, and they started teasing the travelers from afar, floating in circles peacefully, as if to say they were barely breaking a sweat. Brandon gritted his teeth and ordered the group to regroup, to which everybody obeyed. He quickly scanned the Pokémon's conditions. Cinderace and Eevee seemed almost at their limits, whilst his own Regirock, Ash's Pikachu and Lucario didn't seem much better, but still seemed to have a little fight in them despite receiving very heavy blows. He knew they needed to end the fight soon, but it was clear the Regis still had a good amount of stamina left. Knowing winning at this point would be greatly difficult, he thought of another way to end this battle, a last resort to best the mysterious Pokémon. Alright, listen up, the Pyramid King started off. We're going to end this right here, right now, with one final push. But how? Regieleki and Regidrago still seem raring to go, Peonia remarked. At her response, Brandon pulled out two strange Pokeballs from his pockets, and gave one to Go, who upon realizing the rarity of the type of Pokeball Brandon gave him, let out a gasp and said, "These are timer balls, how do you have them?" The young researcher had obviously heard of them, but they were so incredibly rare to obtain he found it surprising that Brandon had some in his possession. Being a frontier brain has its perks, the Regi Master first said, before explaining his idea. Defeating these two Pokémon would be too difficult at this stage, considering the condition of our Pokémon, and even though we have more, the Regis have probably enough strength to deal with all of them one by one. The man stared intently at his and Go's Pokeballs and continued. Our best bet at this stage is to catch them, so Pikachu, Lucario and Regirock will lead the line of attacks since they have the most energy left, and Eevee and Cinderace will support them from afar. We wait for when they least expect it, then me and Go throw the Pokeballs. They should be even more effective than usual since the battle has been going on for quite some time, and if we land a few good hits, we should be able to catch them with a little luck. Got it? Luck doesn't seem like something you'd try to rely on, but you're right, if we just try and keep fighting with all our Pokémon, we probably won't get very far, Ash conceded, to which the rest of the group nodded approvingly. Alright, I'm sold, let's do this. One last push everyone, Brandon shouted, seemingly telling his group and Pokémon to give it their all. The Regi Master took one last look at his group of traveling trainers and Pokémon, then pointed to Regis and shouted, "Go!"
At the experienced man's command, Lucario, Pikachu and Regirock dashed off first, whilst Eevee and Cinderace stood back. Noticing the humans still fighting, the Regis quickly stopped their taunting and launched a Thunderbolt and a Dragon Energy.
Block the Thunderbolt with Pyro Ball, Go quickly ordered. You too, Eevee. Chloe ordered as well. The pair kicked two different rocks in the way of the Thunderbolt, stopping the move from reaching the group of three leading the line, and Ash and Brandon ordered their Pokémon to use Aura Sphere and Stone Edge to do the same with the Dragon Energy. The colliding moves in the center of the field created a smokescreen in the center of the field, but because there was so much electricity from the still active electric terrain, it created some sort of thunderstorm in the middle of the room, with dark clouds going all the way to the top of the far ceiling bursting of electricity. Lucario, Regirock and Pikachu halted their movements once in the thunderstorm, not expecting this as a result. What in the world? Chloe said out loud, noticing just how big the thunderstorm was in the enclosed space. Wind started blowing around the temple and the group was forced to shield their faces. Guys, you need to get out of there, wait, Brandon said, interrupting Ash. This could be our chance to surprise them, we need to attack from every angle. On it. You guys get the sides, I'll get above. Before the Alolan champion could question how exactly she was going to do that, Peonia had already given out her command to her temporary Pokémon. Pikachu, run up the electricity with quick attack. Pika. The electric mouse swiftly built up speed and miraculously started using the electricity provided from the thunderstorm to climb up the smoke. Ash, a bit taken aback on how Peonia figured that out, stood still. That is until Brandon told his Regirock to rush to the left of the opposing Regis, to which the hyperclass trainer implied a similar strategy by ordering Lucario to flank their right. Regidrago and Regieleki then suddenly rushed to the center of the smoke, and the former used Dragon Dance, after having their vision blurred by the thunderstorm. The boosted-powered Dragon Dance was so strong it was able to make the thunderstorm disappear with strong gusts of wind from the speed of the move alone. Once the smoke was completely gone, the two Regis were surprised to find 3 of their opponents completely gone, until suddenly. Thunderbolt. Hyper Beam. Aura Sphere. 3 moves from above and from both sides of the Regis suddenly came towards them. Barely having any time to react, Regidrago quickly shielded itself with its claws whilst Regieleki quickly got out of the blast zone thanks to its speed. The 3 moves collided with Regidrago and the Pokémon was sent flying backwards. Go impulsively saw the opportunity to capture Regidrago and prepared to throw his Pokeball. Brandon's eyes widened at this, as Regieleki had spotted the human trying to throw a Pokeball and rushed Go, knocking him back and making the Pokeball fall out of his hands and roll on the ground. Go! Screamed out his companions in worry. The Pokeball kept rolling gently across the room, and Regieleki was about to take off for it, but was stopped by Cinderace, who looked absolutely furious and started relentlessly attacking the Regi Pokémon in a surprising display of power, eventually overpowering the Regi Pokémon after landing a powerful blaze kick to the Pokémon's chest, sending it crashing to the opposite wall hard. Everybody was shocked by the striker Pokémon's power, with the bunny growling and shaking in anger. Go was the first to react, slowly picking himself from the ground, and grabbing his Pokémon by the shoulder. Hey Cinderace. See, calm down, it's alright. I'm okay. Cinderace seemed to come back to reality, and slowly turned around to find its trainer smiling softly at it. It's okay Cinderace, thank you, Go added in a soft tone. The striker Pokémon smiled slightly, before collapsing to the ground exhausted. Go caught him right before he hit the floor, pulled out its Pokeball and, before returning his Pokémon, said, "Thank you Cinderace, take a nice rest." Still shocked by the dramatic events that happened just a few seconds ago, everybody was practically frozen in place. That is until a hard round object gently brushed up against Chloe's leg, bringing her out of her paralyzed state. She let out a light gasp and was about to pick up the timer ball, when suddenly Regidrago rushed the maroon-haired girl and was about to collide with her. Chloe closed her eyes in fear, but she was abruptly shoved out of the way. Expecting to be launched backwards, the girl's eyes shot open, and to her horror, she saw Regidrago colliding with Ash instead, after the Alolan champion had pushed her out of the way. She screamed out his name as he was sent backwards instead, the trainer hitting the ground with a rough sound, and Chloe rushed to his side. "Ash, I'm okay. I owed you that one," he said whilst holding his hand up. Chloe was left speechless, as Ash, similarly to Go, slowly picked himself off the ground, and stared down Regidrago. Lucario quickly rushed in front of its trainer and growled at the opposing Pokémon, its body glowing a frightening blue as the bipedal Pokémon trembled furiously. "Calm down Lucario," Ash abruptly ordered, the Pokémon in question turning around to face its trainer, still agitated. "Use that anger as your power." Lucario quickly glanced back towards Regidrago, who had retreated close to Regieleki, not really knowing what the human and Pokémon were planning. The Aura Pokémon took multiple deep breaths to calm itself down, and it and its trainer closed their eyes. "Lucario," Ash called out to his Pokémon gently. Lucario seemed to relax, and the bipedal Pokémon kept its eyes closed whilst waiting for its master's orders. Similarly to earlier, trainer and Pokémon matched each other's breathing and started glowing blue. The pair simultaneously extended both their hands in front of them, and Ash repeated, "Use that anger as your power." At the hyperclass trainer's words, Lucario unconsciously started building up an aura sphere in its paws, which started growing bigger, much bigger than usual. "More Lucario, stronger," Ash ordered with his eyes still shut. The aura sphere kept growing even more, to the point where it was already twice its normal size. Stronger, even stronger. Moments passed, and the aura sphere, courtesy of Lucario with the support of Ash, grew almost gigantic, to the point where it was radiating so much aura that it was illuminating the room. Both Pokémon and trainers alike stood and watched, completely captivated by what the young trainer and his Pokémon were doing. Even the opposing Regis were completely stunned. Lucario had seemed to reach its limit on how big he could make the aura sphere. the giant ball of aura practically towering over everyone, and when Ash sensed this, he said, "All right, Lucario." The trainer lifted his arms to the sky, and Lucario did the same, holding the blue sphere of energy in the air. "The proof of our bond." Ash smirked, feeling the aura between him and Lucario become one once more. His and Lucario's eyes opened abruptly, flaring an astonishing bright blue, and the trainer, with a determined look on his face, shouted, "Our full power, gigantic aura sphere." Ash and Lucario suddenly threw their arms in front of them, which caused Lucario's humongous aura sphere to be launched forward, splitting the ground in half as the sphere traveled towards Regidrago and Regieleki, who were simply too shocked to move, and the aura sphere inevitably collided with them, creating a massive blue explosion on contact. Despite being in disbelief by what his partner just did, Go quickly rushed towards the timer ball that was still on the floor. He grabbed it, and simultaneously alongside Brandon, shouted, "Go Pokeball!" As the two trainers threw the Pokeballs into the explosion, both of them absorbing Regieleki and Regidrago. Once the smoke from the Lucario's gigantic aura sphere disappeared, all that was left was the sight of two timer balls laying on the floor, where the two Regis used to be. The group stayed silent, as abruptly. They shook once, they shook twice, they shook for a third time before. Two dings were heard, and Go's Pokédex said, "Regieleki's data will be added to your Pokédex," whilst Brandon's Pokédex said, "Regidrago's data will be added to your Pokédex." "I can't believe it," Chloe expressed out loud softly. "We did it," Go said in a low voice. "We actually did it," Peonia repeated in a similar voice. Grr suddenly went Ash's stomach. Everybody turned their heads towards the Alolan champion, who abruptly ended the silence of everyone currently in the room with the sound of his stomach asking for food. The trainer nervously put both his hands in front of him and stuttered. What? Why you guys try making an aura sphere with your Pokemon? It takes a lot of energy, you know." And with that strange icebreaker from Ash, the group erupted in cheers, ecstatic they had finally bested Regieleki and Regidrago. "Hey, what time is it?" a blonde-haired girl suddenly asked, temporarily stopping her consumption of the delicious food in front of her. A man wearing a big green coat, sitting in front of the girl, checked his watch briefly, before replying. 11:05, he said with a deep voice. "Don't you think it's about time we should go wake him up?" a certain young researcher, also sitting at the same table as the two others, asked generally. "I think we should let him sleep this time," the blonde-haired girl argued. "Yesterday was pretty tiring after all." "Nonsense," the fourth and final person sitting at the table, arms crossed and eyes closed, exclaimed. The maroon-haired girl stood up from the table, and started walking towards the exit of the dining hall as she started to explain. "He isn't the only one tired from yesterday, and besides, we should probably get going soon. I don't really feel like missing our train and being forced to stay here any longer than we need to. I've had enough of the Crown Tundra personally." Peonia, Go and Brandon looked at each other momentarily, and let out a chuckle each before resuming eating their breakfast, as Chloe went to wake up the final member of the group of travelers that had bested Regieleki and Regidrago the day before. It had been around 12 hours since the events at the 3-Point Pass, and today was going to be the final day the group spent in the snowy area. After successfully dealing with Regieleki and Regidrago, the group made their way back to the Pokemon Center in Freezington, where they booked 2 more rooms to let themselves rest until morning. Not much happened during that time. Casual conversations between companions was about as eventful as it got after they left the Split Decision ruins, to the great relief of the entire group. Ash, not surprisingly, was the first one to hit the hay, as he immediately fell into a deep slumber quickly after leaving his Pokemon with Nurse Joy. Chloe had wanted to talk to Ash multiple times since they left the ruins, but found herself incapable of doing so. Chloe held her head at that thought as she walked up the stairs to the way to the room Ash, Go and Brandon were sharing. Since Peonia helped her put the pieces together and realize her feelings for the raven-haired trainer, she had never really thought about what was going to happen after they were done with all the stuff in the Crown Tundra, and a conversation the maroon-haired girl had with Peonia the previous night had brought her back to reality. Flashback to last night. "Phew, I'm beat," Chloe expressed, as she let herself fall onto one of the beds in the room her and Peonia were sharing. "Same here," Peonia added, as she did the same thing as Chloe, falling onto the bed next to hers. "So, what are you going to do now?" Chloe narrowed her eyes slightly, confused, and turned to face Peonia. Huh? What do you mean? The maroon-haired girl asked. Well, what are you going to do about your feelings for Ash? Peonia specified. Chloe's eyes widened, as she wasn't expecting that question at all. A light crimson appeared on her cheeks, and she quietly replied. I don't know. Peonia frowned at her response. She wasn't surprised Chloe didn't really know what to do, but Peonia wasn't going to let Chloe just sit there and do nothing. The blonde-haired girl readjusted herself on the bed, and sat so she could face directly at Chloe. Look Chloe, you're going to have to tell him how you feel soon. I'm not just going to sit here and let you not act on your feelings. Already. I just recently realized I even liked him. Oh please, the first day I met you guys, granted that was only yesterday morning, I could already tell you felt something for him. Heck, I'm pretty sure just about everybody except Ash realized you liked him before you did. What? Chloe said in disbelief. That's not true. I asked both Go and Brandon while we were making our way back here and they both said they knew for a while. You really aren't subtle, you know. Chloe was simply left speechless. Go knowing was a little surprising, but considering how close he is to both her and Ash it's somewhat understandable, but she hadn't even said a word to Brandon about it yet he still knew. Chloe let out a sigh, before trying to argue that she shouldn't confess to Ash yet. But I don't even know if he feels the same way. Peonia raised an eyebrow at her argument, giggled, and continued as if Chloe hadn't said anything, much to the confusion of the maroon-haired girl. Ash is as dense as a brick, so he clearly isn't going to do anything, so if you don't do anything, nothing will happen, simple as that. Peonia then shifted back into a sleeping position before Chloe could say anything and said, Welp, you know what to do, whether you actually do it, that's up to you. I'm going to bed. But what if, Peonia, Chloe shouted. Peonia giggled lightly to herself and simply pretended to keep sleeping. Flashback end Chloe shook her head aggressively as the conversation from last night fully came back to her. She knew Peonia was most likely right, but it's not like it was going to be any easier to do regardless. At this point, Chloe had finally reached Ash's room, so she took a deep breath to calm herself down and pushed her thoughts aside as she slowly opened the door to Ash's room. The room was practically identical to hers and Peonia's, with the only real difference being a third bed, more a mattress, was laid opposite to the two other beds. There weren't any rooms in the Pokemon Center that had 3 beds, so the boys had to improvise. Chloe took her first steps into the room, gently avoiding the messy pile of bags, spare clothes and Pokemon utilities laid around anywhere. Clearly the boys hadn't been bothered to clean up even a little bit, though, considering how late it was when they got back, it was understandable. Soon enough, on the furthest bed from the door, Chloe saw Ash peacefully sleeping on the bed. He laid quite awkwardly on the mattress, with Pikachu also sleeping on his stomach, snoring peacefully. Chloe also heard what seemed like Ash talking in his sleep. Lucario, dodge it, use your aura, he mumbled in his sleep. Chloe held back a laugh. Of course he was dreaming about Pokemon. Now, Ash, still unconscious, threw his hand towards the sky, as if he was commanding his Pokemon. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Pikachu, also not fully conscious, charged up electricity in his cheeks. Chew. All of a sudden, Pikachu released a discharge of energy, which consequently electrocuted Ash, who woke up screaming in pain from the Thunderbolt. Pikachu also woke up, hearing his trainer in distress, only to find he had actually caused it. Ow, I'm really never going to get used to that. Looks like you didn't need my help this time, Chloe suddenly said. Ah. Ash jumped in surprise, not expecting somebody to actually be in the room with him, but he quickly relaxed once he saw it was only Chloe. Oh, it's just you. What? Not happy to see me? She couldn't help but tease. No, of course I am, Ash quickly defended, before quickly asking. It's just, why are you here anyways? Well, I was going to wake you up cause you were sleeping like a Snorlax again, but it seems like Pikachu beat me to it, Chloe explained, before leaning on the wall opposite to the Alolan champion. Do you not know how to put an alarm on your Rotom phone? Oh, obviously I do. But I forgot. Honestly, at this rate, I'm going to have to wake you up every day, Chloe joked with her eyes closed, not really thinking about what she just said. I wouldn't mind that, huh? And just like that, Chloe's eyes shot open, and a blush rapidly came over her face, overthinking what Ash just said. It'd be better than a Thunderbolt as a wake-up, Ash explained. Chloe covered her face in embarrassment as she misunderstood what Ash suggested. Oh, I guess yeah. Chloe stuttered out. Ash stretched his arms and stood up from the bed, with Pikachu hopping on his shoulder. He hadn't bothered to change his clothes since yesterday when went to sleep, so he simply picked up his trusted hat, placed it on his head and walked towards Chloe. Well anyways, Ash suddenly put a hand on Chloe's shoulder, making the girl jump slightly in surprise. Thanks for attempting to wake me up. Come on, let's join the others, he said whilst chuckling with a smile. All Chloe could do was nod awkwardly, as words couldn't quite seem to come out of her mouth. As Ash walked towards the door of the room, Chloe quietly sighed to herself, and thought about how on earth was she ever going to tell him how she felt. The pair swiftly made their way back to the dining hall, and, after Ash quickly went to go get some breakfast, they sat down at the table already occupied by Go, Peonia and Brandon. Well, if it isn't the champion of Alola himself. Seems like Chloe here is the only one capable of waking you up. Peonia teased, to which Ash gave her a cold stare. Great to see you too, Peonia, he replied, before munching on his breakfast, with Pikachu sitting atop of his head. So, what's the plan from here? Chloe asked, changing to a more important subject. The group all looked at each other, as they didn't quite know what to reply. It seemed they had barely thought about the fact that, since they had caught Regieleki and Regidrago, their mission of discovering the mysteries of the Split Decision ruins was technically complete, which meant the group most likely had to go their separate ways. Brandon ended up being the first one to speak up. Well, for my part, I'm going to report our findings to Professor Magnolia's lab. I got a feeling we still haven't seen everything here in the Crown Tundra, and maybe our encounters with Galarian Articuno, Keldeo and the Regis could help us uncover more secrets of this place. Brandon smiled proudly, slightly surprising the rest of the group, and finished. And besides, I got what I originally came for anyways. I got to meet the remaining Regis after all, and even catch one in the process. Upon hearing this, Ash choked on his food, suddenly remembering that Go had also in fact caught Regieleki. Oh that's right, he said, still with a mouthful. He quickly drank some water before congratulating his partner. Good for you Go. You caught Regieleki, one step closer to Mew. Go's eyes widened, also barely remembering that had actually happened. Oh, right. Well thanks Ash. Go's mood then seemingly dampened, something which didn't go unnoticed by Ash, or Chloe for that matter, though. Ash was about to question Go, clearly seeing something was off, but Peonia suddenly spoke up before he could do so. Welp, as for me, I'm thinking I might go adventuring with my dad. Really? Asked Chloe, surprised. When we first met you, that seemed like the last thing you wanted to do. Yeah, it was. Peonia started off in a laughing manner. But, traveling across the tundra with you guys really made me appreciate adventuring. And also, I feel like I owe it to my dad. I think I understand now that he just wanted his daughter to see how much fun adventuring was. Plus, it is indirectly because of him I got to meet you guys after all. The travelers smiled at Peonia's words, glad that she found joy in traveling with them. Brandon was the first one to comment. Good for you. I was thinking you seemed like a natural at adventuring. Heck, I'm pretty sure you managed to keep your cool more than your idol did over there, he pointed out, referencing Ash. Come on Brandon. I kept my cool, the hyperclass trainer argued, ironically not keeping his cool. I am Alola's first champion after all. I doubt I would be if I couldn't keep my cool. Oh so now you care about your title, Chloe chimed in. Really Chloe? Ash said in an outburst. Everybody just laughed at Ash while he simply pouted and got back to eating in peace. 45 minutes passed. The group had long since finished eating their breakfast, and, after picking up their healed Pokémon and packing up their stuff, they were now in front of the Pokémon Center, sitting by a fountain of a strange-looking creature riding atop a horse.
Peonia had called her dad and told him to come to the fountain, where she would reveal her plans and say her goodbyes. Soon enough, Peony came marching down from the same hilltop he was at when the group first saw him.
Nia. I missed you, the father said happily, as he gave her daughter a warm hug which she gladly returned. I missed you too Dad, replied in a similar fashion Peonia. Peony stopped the embrace and turned to look at the smiling group of travelers. Ash, Chloe Brandon, Go. Thank you very much for taking care of my daughter. I hope she hasn't been too much of a bother for you. Not at all, sir. In fact, we would have probably been done for multiple times if she wasn't there, Ash assured. You know we should really teach some of our Pokemon Protect, Go admitted out loud, to which Brandon, Chloe and Ash nodded in agreement. Well, that's great to hear, Peony said, relieved. He turned to face Peonia again and asked. So, Nia, you said you had something to tell me? Yeah, Peonia started off a bit embarrassed. Well, you see, traveling with Ash, Go, Chloe and Brandon has really made me realize just how much fun adventuring is, so, if you wouldn't mind, would you like to go on an advent tour with me? She finished with a warm smile. Nia, Peony seemed to have tears forming in his eyes, and he gave Peonia another hug, a much more forceful one this time. I'd never thought I would hear those words come out of your mouth. Yes, of course. Dad, too tight, Peonia managed to say, as she forced her way out of her emotional dad's arms. Peonia then turned to face her newly found friends that she had just met yesterday, and started off her goodbye, a hint of sadness in her voice. Well, I guess this is goodbye then, I'm really going to miss you guys. Same here, Peonia, Ash said, also saddened they would already have to leave their new friend. Stay strong, young one, you have a bright future ahead of you, Brandon added on. Yeah, as long as you have your Pokemon next to you, you'll be just fine, Go also added. We'll come visit. Chloe finished it all off. Guys, now Peonia started to get a bit emotional. Despite knowing them for just over a day, she really felt like she had formed a bond with the group of travelers, and she knew she would miss them dearly. The Galar native quickly wiped away a few tears of her own. Thank you so much, it was a lot of fun being with you, and if you ever need another travel buddy, you know where to find me, Peonia said with a wink, making the remaining travelers smile at her usual antics. Just before she waved them off, Peonia approached Ash and said, Ash, I haven't told you yet because I wanted it to be a surprise, but I'll be training for the next season of the World Coronation series, so when I catch up to you, let's have a battle. I'll show you just how strong I can become. Ash grinned, happy to have a new rival. You bet, Peonia, though I won't lose so easily. I wouldn't expect anything less. Oh, and one last thing. Peonia then glanced at Chloe, her smile turning into more of a mischievous smirk. She quickly made her way next to the maroon-haired girl and whispered in her ear. Now, don't you go forgetting about what I told you last night, or I might actually steal him from you. What? Chloe screeched, her face turning into a bright shade of red. Then, in an act that had left everyone in the vicinity absolutely speechless, Peonia quickly made her way back to Ash and kissed him on the cheek. Ash's eyes widened at the sensation and was left frozen in place, obviously not expecting the peck at all. Go, Peony and even Pikachu all had their jaws wide open, equally baffled at Peonia's sudden act. Brandon's eyes had also widened, as the kiss really did come out of nowhere, but he simply laughed it off, seeing everybody else's priceless reaction, the biggest one of all being. Chloe had a mix of everybody else's reaction all combined into one. She was blushing to the point where her face was bright red, her eyes were wide open, her jaw was practically on the floor and, on top of all of that, she was shaking in a mixture of shock and anger. Peonia swiftly separated herself from Ash and gave him another wink. No need to be so unfriendly, Ash, just call me Nia. The girl then turned around, not before giving one last wink particularly to Chloe, and waved the group off as she led her father away from the group. Take care, everyone. At this point, Ash just started laughing, still very much taken aback, but nevertheless waved the girl off, as did Go, Brandon and Pikachu. See ya. Take care, they all simultaneously said, whilst Chloe. Peonia. The maroon-haired girl screamed at the top of her lungs, loud enough to make the birds hiding in the snowy trees fly away. Arg, that Peonia, she really knows how to be as annoying as possible, Chloe thought to herself, unamusingly looking through the giant glass window of the train cabin the group were now in. After saying their goodbyes to Peonia, the remaining travelers had swiftly made their way back to the Crown Tundra station, where not long after they hopped on a train that was currently leading them back to the city of Hammerlock. It was still in the early hours of the afternoon, and their time of arrival was estimated to be around sunset time. Currently in the cabin, Chloe had settled with just enjoying the view. Go was laying on one of the couches, strangely staring at Regilicky's Pokeball in his hands, and Ash was, surprisingly not asleep, sitting on the other couch playing a game of peek-a-boo with Dracovish to pass the time. The dragon type particularly seemed to enjoy the fun game, and Pikachu watched on from a distance next to Eevee on the table close to where Chloe was. Brandon for his part had gone to explore the Pokémon on the train, just like he had done last time with Go. The Frontier Brain had even asked the young researcher if he wanted to join him, but Go replied he wasn't up for it, somewhat unusual from him, but the Regi master didn't press on. Ash glanced at Go and noticed he was still looking at his newly caught Regieleki Pokeball, something which he had been doing for quite a while now. Thinking it was about time he asked what his research partner was doing, Ash sighed, returned Dracovish to its Pokeball with a smile, and spoke up. Go. You've been staring at Regielecky's Pokeball ever since we got on the train. What's up? Ash initially asked with a hint of concern in his voice, earning the attention of both Go and Chloe. Go, still in the exact same position, replied. Oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. Come on Go. Something's clearly up, just talk to us, maybe we can help. Ash pressed on. Go sighed, and let the Pokeball he was holding in his hands fall onto his stomach. I'm telling you, it's nothing. Just, shocked. Oh please. You were barely surprised at all after you caught a Suicune for Arceus' sake, yet you're shocked a whole day after you caught a Regieleki? Chloe suddenly exclaimed, not believing at all Go's word. I really can't hide anything from you guys, can I? Go said with a chuckle. Ash and Chloe simply gave each other a knowing look as Go explained further. I just don't feel like I earned this one. Ash and Chloe's expressions changed to a surprised one, with a slight mix of confusion. What do you mean you don't feel like you earned this one? You were a part of the battle, and you were the one who threw the first Pokeball after all, even before Brandon did, Chloe argued. The Vermilion City researcher gave a shake of the head. Even if I did, compared to what you guys did, I really didn't do much. Go's tone changed to a more serious one, slightly worrying his companions. Brandon was basically our leader the entire time, Ash. Well, you basically finished the whole battle all by yourself. Peonia was also a big reason we won, and even you Chloe, I'd argue that without you, we would have all given up long before we defeated them, and all you have is a regular Eevee, no offense Eevee. Eevee. The normal type replied, holding a paw up, as if to say, none taken. Ash spoke up once more, trying to convince Go he wasn't thinking straight. Look Go. It was a team effort, it doesn't matter in the end who caught Regieleki, because nobody did more than everyone else. The truth is, if even just one of us wasn't there, we wouldn't have won, simple as that. Even Chloe added to Ash's words, similarly trying to rationalize with her childhood friend. Ash is right. Besides, it's not like catching the Regis was the main objective for any of us. Well, unless if Ash was looking for an electric-type replacement for Pikachu. She joked, trying to light up the mood, though, despite Ash and Eevee cracking up, Pikachu didn't particularly seem to see the funny side of things. Go frowned after hearing his two dearest friends, picked up the Pokeball on his stomach, stood up from his laying position and replied. I know, but still. With Eternatus and Suicune, I felt like I worked hard to catch them, and I felt satisfied with myself, since, in a way, it felt like my efforts were rewarded, but with Regieleki, it just doesn't feel the same. Ash and Chloe stayed quiet this time, not really knowing what to add on. The raven-haired trainer started drinking some water, pretending to be in his own thoughts, and Chloe simply looked back at the window. An uncomfortable silence occurred, and Go, knowing he was mostly to blame, decided to liven up the mood, though he just had to choose the subject Chloe detested the most at the moment. So, Go started off, putting Regieleki's Pokeball in his bag. What was that kiss from Peonia all about, Ash? He finished with a smirk. At his words, Ash spat out most of the water in his mouth and started coughing uncontrollably, whilst Chloe visibly flinched backward at the sudden change of subject, something which Pikachu, Eevee and Go found absolutely hilarious. Don't know, Ash stammered out, after stopping his coughing fit. Go smirked and narrowed his eyes. Seems like someone's flustered. Well why yeah. What did you expect? Ash shouted back. Oh of course that took me by surprise. Go simply laughed out loud at his response. Chloe then suddenly mustered up the most composure she could and said, lay off him Go. Why you would have probably been as shocked as him if that would have happened to you.
Go raised an eyebrow, surprised Chloe said anything. The Vermilion City researcher couldn't resist the easiest bait of his life now that Chloe was on Ash's side. Oh, not surprising that you would take Ash's side, Chloe.
And now what is that supposed to mean? Chloe screamed, a tinge of pink forming on her cheeks. Well, you and Ash have been getting pretty chummy these past few days. Are you sure you two are just friends? Ash and Chloe's eyes widened at Go's words. The pair then glanced at each other for the briefest moments, before quickly looking away, both blushing like crazy. Oh, of course we are just friends. They screamed simultaneously, causing Go, joined by Pikachu and Eevee this time, to throw another laughing fit. Despite knowing he was practically building his own grave with this much teasing, Go just couldn't stop himself. Man, Peonia was right, teasing is a lot of fun, he said mostly to himself. All of a sudden, the door to the cabin opened. The group looked towards the door to find Brandon, looking at them oddly. Am I interrupting something? Absolutely not, Ash and Chloe once again shouted in unison. Brandon glanced at Go, who, still with a smirk, gave a shrug. Brandon blinked a few times, before deciding to ignore what was going on. Anyways, Ash, I saw your friend Iris on one of the TVs near the front of the train. It seems like she's battling for a place in the Masters 8. Thought you might be interested. What? She's already battling for a spot in the Masters 8? Ash said in absolute disbelief, not knowing she was climbing up the ranks so fast. Pikachu. We need to go see. And with that, the raven-haired trainer was gone in a flash, followed closely by his trusty Pikachu, talking to himself about how on earth Iris had surpassed him so quickly. Whilst the group was left stunned, Go took the chance to quickly stand up, walk towards his childhood friend and whisper in her ear. Peonia told me what you guys talked about last night, and judging by Ash's reaction earlier, you got nothing to worry. I'm rooting for you, he finished with a smile. What? Chloe swore at that very moment she was going to rip Peonia's hair off next time they saw each other. Finally, back to civilization, Go said while stretching, after just exiting the Hammerlock station. Ditto. Added Chloe and Ash, expressing the same relief. Brandon chuckled at the two teens' reactions and said, you guys sure seem relieved. Can you really blame us? Ash retorted, raising an eyebrow. I guess not. The group, having just arrived from the Crown Tundra, took time to take in their surroundings. The sun was just about to set, and the streets of Hammerlock were just as bustling as when Ash, Go and Chloe first arrived in the city, and that very same trio would tell you just how great it felt to finally be back to society after seemingly being isolated in the snowy tundra. Our flight back to Kanto isn't before 2 hours from now, is it? Go and Chloe nodded in response to Ash's question. Guess we have some time to kill. What are you planning on doing, Brandon? Well, I was thinking of going towards the Magnolia's lab already. It's quite far away from Hammerlock and I'd like to get there as soon as possible. The older man explained. Oh, I see. You must be pretty excited to tell the professor all about the Regis. Ash replied. Go flinched at the mention of the legendary Pokémon, but nobody noticed. Brandon chuckled before responding with a smile. Of course, I've been studying their species for as long as I can remember, and finally uncovering the mysteries behind Regieleki and Regidrago. I can't deny it feels fantastic. The rest of the group, and in particular Go, stood slightly shocked. Brandon didn't seem particularly like the type to be emotional about, well, anything, but the way he talked about the Regis, it was easy to tell how much it meant to the frontier brain. Wow, Brandon, Ash started off. Welp, for what it's worth, I'm glad you got to finally meet all the Regis. Thanks, kid. Brandon thanked in appreciation. I guess this is where we go our separate ways then. Hey Brandon, Go suddenly said, causing everyone to turn towards him. The person he was addressing looked at Go curiously as he continued. I know you said you wanted to go to the professor's as fast as possible, but I have a favor to ask. Brandon had a feeling this was coming, but nevertheless pressed on. What is it? I want to battle you, right here, right now. The young researcher finished with as much confidence as he could muster. Chloe and Ash seemed to be in shock at Go's sudden request, but Brandon kept his cool and simply replied. You're on. After a few minutes of walking in silence, the group had arrived at a battlefield situated in a park, which coincidentally was the same exact battlefield where Ash's Lucario battled Brandon's Regirock the first day they arrived in Hammerlock. That being said, the circumstances of this battle were widely different. Brandon and Go stared each other down, each on either side of the field. Their facial expressions were hard to read, but Go seemed to be conflicted on the inside, something which he tried his best to ignore. Ash, acting as referee for the battle, was on the middle line of the battlefield, and Chloe, sitting on a bench with Pikachu and Eevee, watched on with great attentiveness. "This is bound to be interesting," she said, with Pikachu and Eevee letting out cries of approval. "As a one-on-one okay?" Ash got no audible response, but nods from either side of the battlefield was enough for him to understand. "All right then, send out your Pokémon," he said in an overly dramatic referee impression, to which Chloe facepalmed and mumbled something about how Go and Ash were so alike. Go glanced at the firmly gripped Pokeball in his hand, the reflection of the sun bouncing off the red and white sphere as he took a deep breath, before shouting, "Regieleki, lend me your strength." Brandon, seemingly already knowing which Pokemon Go was going to use, did what Go most definitely wanted him to do, and sent out Regielecki's other half. "Regidrago, I need your assistance." The two legendary Pokemon bursted out of their Pokeballs and appeared onto the battlefield. The Regis exchanged a look of confusion, not familiar with being on opposite sides, but seeing their newly assigned trainers behind them, on top of their desire not to be bested by the other, it quickly became a shared look of determination. "Ready?" Ash got no response once again, but he knew he didn't need one. "Battle start." "Extreme speed. Block it with your arms." Regieleki didn't hesitate, and immediately dashed towards its counterpart at extreme velocity. Regidrago managed to block most of the damage of the move with its big jaw-like arms. Thunderbolt. Dragon energy. Once again, Regieleki took the first step, and after quickly recovering from its previous attack, it glowed a blinding yellow and launched a powerful thunderbolt towards Regidrago, who in a similar fashion, glowed a blinding purple and launched a dragon energy. The two moves collided in the center of the field, neither Pokémon managing to overpower the other one. Go really isn't wasting any time going on the offensive, Chloe noted out loud, seeing her childhood friend act fast, almost agitated. But Brandon seems to know that, and is countering perfectly, Ash suddenly said, in front of Chloe, still on the edge of the battlefield, keeping his eyes fully concentrated on the battle. "Electric terrain, then extreme speed again," Go shouted. Regieleki suddenly burst out electricity, sending an electric current around the battlefield, then quickly rushed towards Regidrago once again. "Dragon Dance." Brandon countered. Regieleki was about to make contact with Regidrago, but was suddenly sent flying by the makeshift whirlwind of Dragon Dance, as Regidrago simultaneously dealt damage and boosted its attack and speed. "Regieleki!" Go screamed out worriedly, seeing his Pokémon get launched back to his side of the field. He clenched his fists, frustrated with himself, but something clicked in his mind this time, causing him to relax slightly. "Right," Go said in his mind. "I can't let my emotions take control of a battle. Brandon taught you this." Go took another deep breath and calmed down. This time he was going to let Brandon come to him. Brandon watched on curiously, almost sensing the inner conflict Go was having with himself, before going on the offensive. "Rush in with Dragon Claw." Waited out Regieleki. At his trainer's command, Regieleki stayed put, and waited for its counterpart to get closer. Just as Regidrago was approaching, Go suddenly ordered, "Fly up and Thundercage." Back up Regidrago. In a flash, Regieleki flew relatively high and started crackling with electricity and was about to let it pour onto Regidrago. Brandon saw what Go was trying to do and ordered his Pokémon to disengage. What the Pyramid King didn't expect though was Go's next move. "Redirect the electricity as a thunderbolt." "Wait, what?" simultaneously said Chloe and Ash from the sidelines. Unexpectedly, Regieleki used the electricity it had stored up from Thundercage and concentrated it into a thunderbolt. Brandon, obviously not expecting this, could only watch in surprise as the thunderbolt connected with Regidrago, creating a miniature explosion and knocking back Regidrago with some force. Chloe and Ash were still stunned as the battlefield became awfully quiet. As Regidrago slowly picked itself up, Brandon smirked. "Not bad, kid, not bad," he said just loud enough for only himself to be able to hear. "Dragon Dance again." "No you don't, Thunderbolt Regieleki." Just as Regidrago finished boosting his attack and speed once more, it was now face to face with a thunderbolt. Go was sure that Brandon had messed up, since even with the boost of speed there was no way Regidrago could dodge in time. But he didn't know Brandon never had the intention of dodging. Hammer arm on the ground. Regi Drago's right arm swiftly glowed white and smashed into the ground powerfully, making dirt from the ground fly into the air and subsequently block the entirety of the thunderbolt. Go was left in disbelief. Dragon claw with your right arm. Brandon wasn't done yet though, as Regi Drago was once again on the move. Go, still a little shocked, reacted late. Dodge it to your right. Switch to your left arm. Regi, being told late what to do, floated to the right a bit later than it would have hoped to avoid the dragon claw coming to its left, and Brandon had perfectly predicted its dodge direction and told Regi Drago to use dragon claw with its other arm instead, earning him a clean hit. Now hammer arm upwards. Go could only stand and watch as Regi Drago quickly racked up the damage onto his own Pokemon, and with Regi now sent flying in the air by a powerful hammer arm, Brandon knew the battle was over. Dragon energy. Readjust yourself and block it with Thunderbolt. Dragon claw on the ground, launch yourself upwards. As Regi Drago launched its dragon energy, it simultaneously propelled itself into the air with a dragon claw. Regi managed to adjust itself and fire off the Thunderbolt, but wasn't expecting Regi Drago to now be in the air, causing the electric type move to miss, and making Regi Drago get a free shot with dragon energy. The move evidently hit its target and caused a smokescreen. Regi worriedly screamed out Go again, but even he knew it was futile, as Regi's body slowly dropped down from the smokescreen, fainted. Ash, a bit stunned, noticed Regi clearly not able to battle, and said, Regi is unable to battle, Brandon wins. Go quickly rushed towards his new legendary Pokemon to check its condition. You alright, Regi? The electric responded with incomprehensible noises, which Go seemed to interpret as it being okay. The Vermilion City researcher stared at the ground, evidently disappointed with himself. Suddenly, a hand was laid on his shoulder. Hey! Brandon started off. Go gave no response but glanced at the man, before looking down again. Come on, let's get our Pokemon healed up. Right. A few beeping sounds awoke the familiar trainers from their somewhat quiet state, and a certain Vermilion City researcher stood up from one of the couches and went up to the counter in the Pokemon Center. Arriving at the counter, Nurse Joy handed Go his singular Pokeball with a smile. Here you go. Regi should be good as new. Thanks, Nurse Joy, calmly replied the trainer. I must say, I'd never thought I'd see anyone come in with a Regi. You must have worked hard to catch such a well-renowned Pokemon, Nurse Joy commented, clearly still taken aback at the fact someone had actually caught a Pokemon that was supposedly nothing but a myth. You would think that, but Go let out a sigh, abruptly cutting himself off, before slowly walking back towards the rest of his companions, leaving a confused Nurse Joy to wonder what was up with the trainer. As Go approached Ash, Chloe and Brandon, the latter three noticed their friend come back with Regi's Pokeball in hand, trying his best to hide his dejected state, though even Go knew he wasn't fooling anyone. Hey Go, awkwardly saluted Ash. Hey everyone, Regi is all healed up, he replied in a similar manner. That's nice, commented Chloe. An awkward silence occurred, and it wasn't the first one today either. Truth be told, ever since Brandon's battle with Go, the usually cheerful and fun atmosphere around the group of trainers was replaced with a rather quiet one, as nobody really knew what to say. The battle had ended surprisingly soon, most likely due to the fact Regi had severely boosted its attack power and, even without it, the group knew the Dragon-type legendary Pokemon only needed a few hits to completely overwhelm its opponent. Go was in his own mind, clearly disturbed with himself after his battle with Brandon. Ash and Chloe had attempted on multiple occasions to start small talk, trying their best to change to any other subject imaginable with minimal success, and Brandon, for his part, hadn't said a word to anyone since the battle. Chloe quickly checked the time on her Rotom phone, and noted it was about time everybody got a move on, since their plane for Kanto would be departing soon. Hey, we should probably get going, wouldn't want to miss our flight. Alright. Brandon suddenly spoke up, surprising everyone a little bit as it was the first words he had uttered in quite some time. Let's move. The quartet made their way outside the Pokemon Center, ready to go their separate way, but right after exiting the doors of the building, Go suddenly addressed the Pyramid King. Brandon. The man in question turned around, slightly ahead of the group, and listened on. There was clear nervousness and doubt in the young researcher's eyes, but Go tried his best to address him seriously. Listen, I thought about, well, everything that has happened recently, and I think, you. Brandon raised an eyebrow, awaiting curiously his words. Go relaxed himself briefly, before finally saying, I think you should have Regi. Ash and Chloe clearly weren't expecting that, and they immediately tried to rationalize with their good friend. Go. What are you talking about? Are you seriously just thinking of giving Regi away? Ash said, with Chloe silently expressing the same feeling. Go didn't budge though, and continued. Look, I know you guys said it isn't a big deal that I was the one who caught Regi, and I understand that, it's just, after seeing how much the Regis mean to Brandon, I can't bring myself to accept Regi as a partner, when clearly, the one these Pokemon were meant for was you, Brandon. Go explained. Ash and Chloe were still utterly baffled, but Brandon still didn't say anything. I know that you're probably going to be opposed to this, but still. Go then switched from his serious expression to a confused one, after noticing something strange. Why are you smiling? Go said with a hint of anger towards Brandon. Indeed, Brandon, to the confusion of everyone else, was grinning almost as if he found what Go was saying funny. Before anybody could question further, Brandon turned away from the group and said, Kid, you've got to be kidding me, right? I am not. I'm serious. You deserve Regi more than. Cut it out already. Brandon said, interrupting Go mid-sentence. You're telling me that after all you did to obtain Regi, you want to just give it away. But the battle with the Regis. I didn't do nearly as much as you guys. You know what, you're right. Brandon admitted, turning back around. But you know what you did that nobody else got to see? I've seen you battle and train till you physically couldn't anymore after the whole Articuno incident because you felt guilty. I've seen you battle your heart out in the Roaring Sea Caves, just so you could meet up with everyone else, but nobody ever saw that. Brandon smiled again, and put a hand on Go's shoulder. You might have not seen it yourself, but your dedication to the entirety of this journey, I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes, and honestly, if you think for 1 second that you don't deserve Regi simply because you had a bad battle, think twice. Go was left absolutely speechless. He almost didn't believe the words that came out of Brandon's mouth. Was he really that impactful? He almost wanted to doubt Brandon's words, but with the amount of sincerity the man had in his speech, he simply couldn't. Ash and Chloe glanced at each other and smiled, happy to know Brandon had finally gotten through to Go. Brandon chuckled at Go's still stunned reaction and backed away from the group. Well, we've wasted enough time here. I appreciate you all for sticking with me. We'll meet again, I'm sure, he declared. It was really nice traveling with you, Brandon. Personally, I feel like I learned a lot from being with an experienced trainer like yourself. Chloe suddenly piped up, showing her appreciation towards the older trainer. Thank you. I wish you the best of luck with finding your goal. I can tell you're dedicated to your cause, and that you'll get you far in life, Chloe. Remember that. Brandon said, to which Chloe nodded with a smile. Oh, and keep an eye out for Mr. Champion over there. He's known for getting himself in trouble more than once. Ash deadpanned at his peer's words, and Chloe let out a laugh before replying. Will do, Brandon, will do. Brandon then turned towards Ash, smiled and ruffled his hair. Nice seeing you again, Ketchum. Best of luck in the World Coronation Series. Thanks, Brandon. Next time we meet, let's battle again, excitedly replied Ash, eager to face Brandon again. Although he felt the need to add, I would rather that, don't use Regi. I don't really want to face that again. I won't if you don't use that Lucario of yours, Brandon joked back, causing Ash to immediately go back on his request. Oh, on second thought, Regi doesn't seem too bad. The group shared a laugh, with even Go giggling a bit. Brandon turned towards Go one last time and said, Stay strong, kid, don't ever doubt yourself again, got it? Why yeah, I hear you, Brandon, thanks, Go managed to say. Brandon smiled and began walking away. Ash and Chloe already started waving goodbye, but Go had one final thing to add. Brandon. The Regi master stopped briefly and looked back. Once I get stronger, I want a rematch, Regi against Regi, one more time. You got it, kid, Brandon replied with a smile. Hey, don't forget about me, I asked first, suddenly said Ash, not wanting Brandon to forget about their promise already. Brandon laughed at the Pallet Town native's action, started walking away from the group and said, Of course I won't forget Ketchum. After all, I already decided a while ago that Peonia is not going to be your only rival next season. Huh? You never told me that, Ash retorted in shock, surprised that Brandon was also planning on joining the World Coronation Series. Chloe and Go facepalmed, and simultaneously put a hand on Ash's shoulder, as Brandon simply disappeared into the sunset. Ash held his head. Next season was not going to be easy. Go, can you calm down, for a sec? The professor's not going anywhere, Chloe complained in between breaths. I can't wait. We got so much information about the Crown Tundra, I'm just dying to tell the professor. He's going to lose it when we tell him we meet so many legendary Pokémon. Go responded, not stopping his continuous running whatsoever. We've been running ever since we got out of the airport, my legs can't take it, Chloe complained further. She glanced at her other companion, and saw him with a big grin on his face, confusing her. If you would go on more adventures with us, maybe then your legs could take a good run, Ash told her, still with a smile on his face. Chloe was about to retort angrily, but soon realized she couldn't. That goofy smile had captivated her too much at this point. Chloe laughed, and did her best to keep up the pace, as the trio of trainers raced into the night, the moon now shining brightly above them. It had been a long and pretty tiring flight back home from Galar, but that fatigue was barely noticeable at all, as the moment Ash, Go and Chloe landed in the Vermilion City Airport, the young trainers immediately started making their way towards the professor's lab as fast as they could, despite the constant complaints of a maroon-haired girl. A good while of running later, and after one steep climb up a hill, the trio had finally made it to the entrance of Professor Cerise's lab. Woo! We made it, declared happily Go, being the first one to make it to the entrance. Chloe and Ash arrived soon after, the former taking time to regain her energy. Come on. Let's go see the professor, they must be waiting for us, Go added, as he once again started running again, this time not bothering to wait for his two friends behind him. That goes sometimes, Chloe said after a sigh, frustrated with her childhood friend's excessive energy. Hey, at least it seems he's finally gotten over that Regi stuff, Ash reasoned. Yeah, I guess you're right Ash, admitted the maroon-haired, as she slowly started walking up the stairs to the lab, followed by the raven-haired trainer. Ash laughed slightly. You know, it feels nice to hear you call me by my name instead of Ketchup. I can start again if you want Ketchup, Chloe replied sarcastically, causing Ash to frantically throw his hands in front of him. Please don't. The trainer practically begged. Chloe laughed out loud, finding his reaction quite amusing, and pretty cute at that. It is crazy to think how differently we act towards each other now compared to a few days ago, Chloe thought out loud. True, but I guess it's for the best. I got to know an amazing person after all, Ash said, turning towards her with a big grin once again. Chloe couldn't help but blush at the raven-haired trainer, and stuttered out a reply. Why yeah, me too. Ash then abruptly grabbed Chloe's hand, causing the girl's blush to deepen, and took off running before she could say anything. Come on, everybody is waiting for us.
Wait. Ash. And so, the two trainers once again sprinted towards the lab, leaving behind a rather confused and surprised Pikachu.
Truth be told, Pikachu hadn't really said or did anything ever since yesterday, mainly because he was too focused on observing his beloved trainer, particularly the way he acted around the maroon-haired girl. Pikachu smiled to himself. It seemed, from what he had observed, his trainer finally found a suitable mate, though he was confused as to why they still hadn't admitted their affection towards each other. I mean, even he had noticed they clearly weren't just friends. Pikachu sighed, before going to join the rest of the group. By the time Ash, Chloe and Pikachu had arrived at the lab, Go had already started practically screaming information at Professor Cerise vividly. And then we ran into a Dynamax Greedant that started attacking us, but we got saved by a wild Keldeo Who was part of the Swords of Justice that also seemed to know Ash, and it did this really cool. Oh okay. Jigo, please calm down, Professor Cerise begged, backing up in his chair. Looks like they sure had a fun adventure, commented Krissa, with Ren nodding in approval next to her. Hey Professor! Ash suddenly shouted, waving hello. Professor Cerise noticed in the corner of his eye Ash, Chloe and Pikachu make their way into the lab. Oh, hey you two. How was the Crown Tundra? It was honestly pretty fun, we met a lot of cool Pokémon, Chloe explained. Though, I think you've heard enough of that from Go. Why yeah, sort of, Professor Cerise replied. Though, it's nice to hear you've enjoyed yourself, Chloe. I was honestly pretty worried. Chloe smiled, happy to know her dad was worried about her. Nothing to worry about, after all. Chloe then suddenly elbowed Ash on the shoulder somewhat friendly, and continued. I had Mr. Alola Champion here to keep me company. Why, you didn't need to hit me for that, Ash complained, rubbing his shoulder. Professor Cerise seemed surprised at the playful attitude between the two, but nevertheless smiled. That's nice to hear. Krissa alongside Ren looked on at the scene with amusement, until the latter fully realized what Chloe said, and asked. Wait, did Chloe just say Alola Champion? Krissa, Ren and Professor turned to face Ash questioningly. The trainer went wide-eyed, realizing he had also never bothered to tell the professors about being the champion of Alola. Ash suddenly yanked Chloe's hand and started sprinting towards the Pokemon area. I just remebered something. See, come on Chloe, I need to show you something in the park real quick. The remaining people in the lab stood still, simply surprised. They saw Pikachu was left behind, and the Pokemon, noticing everybody's gaze on him, simply shrugged. Go, deciding changing the subject was probably a good idea, asked something that was on his mind ever since he entered the lab. Hey, whatever happened to all the Piplups you guys hatched? Krissa, Ren and Professor Cerise looked at each other uneasily, and Ren responded. About that. In a random daycare south of Cerulean City, WHO in their right mind would hatch this many Piplups. A daycare lady screamed, wondering how this happened while being assaulted by multiple Sinnoh starter Pokemon. We are never taking orders from Cerise Labs again, declared another daycare worker, slamming her fist on one of the desks in anger. Why did I become a caretaker? A third worker asked herself, being surrounded by an angry mob of Piplups.
Oh okay, we should be good here. I really didn't feel like having to explain that again, Ash said, finally coming to a stop.
Things would have been much simpler if you had told us about it earlier, Chloe argued, to which Ash didn't respond, but let out a laugh. The duo had run all the way to the top of Cerise Park, overlooking the plains where resided most of the Pokemon caught by Go. Most of them were asleep by this time, but some of Go's ghost and dark types were still awake. Chloe and Ash simultaneously looked up to the ceiling of the glass dome and took in the wonderful sight. The full moon of the night shone brightly, illuminating beautifully the dark sky alongside the stars. The two trainers leaned onto the metal railings, and Ash broke the comfortable silence. Man, I didn't know how beautiful the park looked at night. You can say that again, Chloe agreed, before switching topics to something that had been on her mind for a while now. Say Ash. The person in question turned towards Chloe, causing her to get a bit nervous, but nevertheless continued. Why, you know how, back when we were battling the Regis, you pushed me out of the way when Regidrago was charging at me, why? Ash seemed to think about his answer for a moment, but eventually said, I think what I said back then summed it up pretty well. I owed you one. You didn't owe me anything. Chloe argued softly. Well, maybe for the whole using a move on me, but still. No, it wasn't for that, Ash explained, gaining a serious look on his face, confusing the maroon-haired girl. I owed you one, for sticking with me. Now Chloe was even more confused. What? Ash chuckled at the girl's reaction and continued. I know I've not always been the easiest person to get along with. Sometimes I let my temper get the best of me, and I'm not the most normal guy out there. You're definitely right about that. Ash glared at Chloe for a brief second before explaining further. Despite that, you've always accepted me for who I am. When we first got to Hammerlock, honestly you had the right to get mad at me, and I understand that, but the next day, you didn't all of a sudden hate me for acting like a kid, you stuck with me. Ash smiled at Chloe, the girl left speechless at his words, but Ash continued. I'm still not totally sure why I dove after you when the whole Articuno thing happened, but I knew that there was something within me that wanted to protect you at all cost, keep you close to me. I don't know how to describe it, but I want you to know that, you're important to me, Chloe, and I care for you, a lot. Chloe couldn't believe her ears, yet her blushing face definitely did. All this time, Ash was looking out for her, and knowing that, gave her stomach butterflies. Chloe smiled softly, before looking towards the park once more. You know Ash, I really should be the one thanking you here. Now it was Ash's turn to look confused and partly shocked, but he let the girl continue regardless. You've always been really determined to show me how awesome Pokemon are, and you've always motivated me to find my goal, despite me not always being the nicest person ever with you, and on top of that, you always supported me with my struggles. No matter what doubt I had, or how pathetic I felt at times, you were always there to reassure me. After the Articuno incident, I screamed at you, cried in front of you, yet you were still there, right next to me, supporting me all the way. Chloe turned to face Ash once more, and saw his clearly surprised state, so she decided to break the serious tension, and joked. And also I probably owe you for saving my life like 3 times or something. The two shared a laugh, happy to be in each other's company, and Chloe added, I'm really glad I went with you guys to the Crown Tundra. I'm glad you came along, Chloe. The two stared into each other's eyes, and, thinking back to what Peonia had told her, Chloe decided there was only one real way she could truly get through to sharing her feelings with Ash. Chloe started getting really nervous, but nevertheless, she mustered up all the courage she had. I never been quite great with words, but I really do care for you a lot too, Ash, but I think this shows it better. Suddenly Chloe quickly closed the distance between her and Ash, went on her tiptoes to gain a bit of height, and kissed Ash straight on the lips. Ash's eyes widened. He wasn't sure if time had truly stopped, but for him, it definitely felt like it. He felt like he was floating on a cloud, and the feeling he was having was more exhilarating than any battle he has ever had. Chloe quickly backed away, blushing as red as a tomato, but nevertheless smiled at Ash. I hope that S sums it up well. Ash was still frozen, not believing what had just happened. The trainer slowly touched his lips, as if to remember the feeling of Chloe's lips on his. Unfortunately, his severe lack of a reaction slowly made Chloe more nervous, so she quickly thought of a way to get out of the situation. We should probably go back to the lab. The others are probably wondering where we are right about now, Chloe stammered out, still blushing, slowly walking away from Ash. She turned her back towards him as she walked, but Ash had something to add. Wait, see Chloe. Chloe turned around slowly, only to be once again face to face with Ash once more, and this time, his lips went to hers. The kiss lasted only mere seconds, but to Chloe, it made her question if she was actually dreaming, as her heart fluttered and her knees felt weak. Ash swiftly separated himself from the maroon-haired girl, and was almost as big of a blushing mess as her. I hope that better explains how I feel too. I hope you keep staying by my side, Chloe, Ash said with an embarrassed smile. Ash, the two were frozen on the spot, as both still couldn't quite believe what had happened, but the sudden words coming from just behind them swiftly broke them out of their trance, and also probably gave them a heart attack. Our relationship sure developed, faster than I expected, Go said, embarrassed and surprised as to what he just walked in on. Chloe and Ash glanced at each other for no longer than a second, before suddenly going into panic mode as the two screamed at the top of their lungs, surely loud enough to wake up just about everyone in the park, blushes even more present on their faces. Ash was the first one to escape the situation, calling out his Dragonite and embarrassingly saying, I just remembered I had to give something to my friend in Pewter City. Got to go. I left stuff over at my friend's house. I'll be right back, Chloe said in a similar fashion. And with that, the two young trainers were gone in a flash, one flying on the back of his Dragonite and the other sprinting like there was no tomorrow, leaving a still shocked Go just to stand there. Pikachu then suddenly appeared next to him, having just missed the scene. He looked confused, as he was sure he heard his trainer just a moment ago. Go looked at Pikachu, and laughed. Well, things are bound to get interesting from here, Pikachu. Pikachu, still confused, blinked a couple times, before turning to go back to the lab. He wasn't exactly sure what had just happened, but what he did know for sure was that he desperately needed a good nap. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts and reviews in the comment box. Now I will see you in the next video.